All right, I think we're live for the world to see. For everybody watching on YouTube and to the committee members, welcome to the Joint Interim Corporations, Political Subdivisions and Elections Committee. I actually mixed that up a little bit, maybe on purpose. And so today's the first day. We've got 3 days, and looking through the agenda with the public testimony requests that we've got, they're going to be 3 very full days, which is great because we do want public testimony. Just public interaction is awesome. We'll have better drafted legislation because of that public interaction. This might be the spiciest agenda the Joint Corporations Committee has ever had due to the amount of public testimony requests. I'm predicting a wave. And so I'm pretty excited about that. Anyways, before we get into roll call and everything else, for those of you that don't know, we recently lost one of our members, a member that started with both me and Representative Clem at the same time from the land of camels. Representative Roy Edwards passed away. And with that, I would like to turn things over to Representative Clem to lead prayer for their family, for Representative Roy Edwards' family and friends. So Representative Clem, please.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let's pray. Father, we come before you and we ask you to comfort the grieving hearts of the Edwards family. Lord, we're thankful for the fact that we got to know Roy and what he contributed, not only as a person to his family, but also to the state. We thank you for his public service, and we thank you for his memory. Oh, Lord, I pray in the days to come, I know it's only going to get harder, not easier, when all the family leaves, and in particular, his wife is alone. Lord, that'll be the time that the grief really begins to set in. And so, Lord, I ask that you would comfort her hearts, Lord, that you would give the family strength to bear up any burdens that they have at the moment. And Lord, that you would just help them to rejoice in the memory of Roy, and just be with them in the days to come. We pray that you guide this meeting now, and we ask it all in the name of Jesus. Amen.
Hey, Senator Case is joining us. There's the guy. Representative Clem, thank you very much. Representative Edwards' family is certainly in our thoughts and our prayers, and we're definitely going to miss him. Representative Edwards, by the way, for those listening, the reason why you can purchase gold and silver in the state of Wyoming without having tax applied to it is Representative Edwards passed that as legal tender.
That's right.
He was the man, the myth, the legend behind that, and we're certainly going to miss him. It's a tough deal. Senator Case, thanks for coming, man. Good to see you, brother.
I was like 10 feet away, and I gave up looking, and I went all the way back. But it was good because they said that you had coffee.
I did.
They said you stole it.
I did. I did steal a bucket of coffee. Hopefully they'll forgive me. All right, so we're going to go ahead and call the roll. Katie, are you doing that? Or Ted?
Mr. Chairman, I'll be doing that. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, sir. Go ahead, please.
Senator Case.
Wait me in, would you?
Yeah, Senator Case is here.
Senator Nethercutt.
Excused.
Senator Schuler.
Here.
Senator Scott.
Here.
Representative Blackburn.
Here.
Representative Clausen.
Here.
Representative Clem.
Here.
Representative Clifford.
Here.
Representative Duncan.
Here.
Representative Ayer.
Here.
Representative Furphy.
Here.
Co-Chairman Landon.
Here.
Chairman Lindholm.
Here.
You have a quorum, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Ted. Appreciate that.
Nethercutt's
Senator
here.
Nethercutt's here.
Lucky us.
Are you though? No. And I did want to give notification. We do have one member of the public here already. Thank you for being here, Mr. Winnie. But for those that are listening in online and for members of the committee, this room is littered with microphones in here. So make sure there's no way to mute whatsoever if you're in this room. So if you're having a conversation as part of the public in the back of the room, or you're whispering as a member up here to one of your colleagues about passing coffee to you, and make sure you know that the microphone will pick that up and that will be live streamed on YouTube. So that's fun. Does that about cover it, Katie?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Awesome. Thank you so much. All right, members, we're I think we're setting a pace here. We've got our plastic shields. I don't know if anybody can really see that on YouTube. We're socially distanced, 6 foot apart. We got our little plastic shields. Make sure nobody gets sick. That's super important right now. As everybody knows, COVID is spiking throughout the state of Wyoming, so it's important that we take that responsibility upon ourselves. By God, we don't need government to tell us what to do. We can do it ourselves, and really appreciate our legislative staff setting us up with the means to be able to meet in person. All right, so we're gonna kick the ball here. Before I do so, Mr. Co-Chairman Landon, did you want to start with anything?
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Just a couple of thoughts. And I really appreciate Representative Clem starting us off the way he did this morning. Thank you for that, Representative. I know this, I'll sure miss that glint in the eye of Representative Edwards and his sense of humor. And you know, there's a hole on the Corporations Committee this morning. And so really appreciated that, Representative Clem. The co-chairman is right. Corporations Committee, we've got a big lift over the next 3 days. But there's a reason why we're on this Corporations Committee. It's because we can execute that lift. I think given this week, Mr. Co-Chairman, I think it's even more appropriate that we're taking up all of the things that we are to have this conversation as we get prepared for the next session. And so with that, it's great to see everyone. Congratulations to those who were reelected. And congratulations, Representative Furphy. We look forward to having you in the Senate. That's going to be terrific. And Mr. Co-Chairman, back to you.
Right on. Thank you, Mr. Co-Chairman. All right, so we're gonna kick things off here. Members, we're gonna start with local governments topic, and that is going to be, our first is for consideration of draft legislation, county funding for burials for indigent persons. And that is 21 LSO 184 version 0.5. And as you remember, committee members, this was a suggestion that was brought to us by the counties as an issue that they currently face. And as part of our topic is local government. So we decided to take this up. Before I turn it over to LSO, any conversation about that before we kick? Go ahead, Representative.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a question. I know that this was, I thought that this was passed actually in our budget. I know there was an amendment to do so, but maybe it wasn't. So I don't know if maybe LSO can tell us if there already is now an existing surcharge and we're just codifying this. So that's my question. Thank you.
I think we've got Chairman Nethercott has an idea about that. Go ahead, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I carried that amendment in the Senate and it passed the House, and then the governor vetoed it.
Boom. The executive.
We worked so hard to get that through, and then it was one of his vetoes outside of the budget bill.
Wow.
Senator Nethercott, was it something you said?
It always is.
All right. And who do we got lighting the tires on this? Ted, I'm guessing you're presenting this piece of legislation?
I am, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Okay, rock and roll.
All right. So thank you for that introduction. This is 21 LSO 184, working draft 0.5. And you can see in the bill title what this draft does. It provides for reimbursement of county burial expenses for indigent persons. It imposes a surcharge on death certificates in order to provide for those reimbursements. Creates an account, specify the applicability. So down at the bottom, page 1, you can see this goes into 183504, and then on to page 2, subsection C is open. And under current law, counties are required to provide for the burial of individuals who meet 2 conditions. 1, they do not have a sufficient estate or other resources to pay for their burial. And 2, at the time of death, they were not receiving Medicaid benefits or power benefits, which is the state TANF program, or supplemental security income. So what this bill draft does is it creates a reimbursement mechanism for counties for these expenses. So if you look on page 2, lines 8 through 14, this requires counties to account for these burial expenses. And then by August 1, following a fiscal biennium, each county can request reimbursement for these expenses from the state treasurer. So those are the changes to that subsection C, lines 8 through 14. And then continuing down page 2, you can see the bill draft opens up 35.1.428. And these are the Department of Health statutes. And there's a new subsection created here. And what this new subsection C does down at the bottom of page 2 is it imposes a surcharge of $5 on death certificates. So for every copy of a death certificate, folks would have to pay an additional $5. These funds are deposited into a new account, the county burial account, which this draft creates. That's at the top of page 3. And then the state treasurer, subject to legislative appropriation, can provide reimbursements to counties for these burial expenses using these funds. If there is enough of an appropriation to reimburse all the counties, then they all get their all their expenses reimbursed. If there are insufficient funds to reimburse all the counties, then each county receives an equal percentage reimbursement. So it's a prorated amount. And then down the bottom of page 3, section 2 provides applicability. Only expenses incurred on or after the effective date of this act would be subject to reimbursement. And then section 3 provides an effective date of July 1, 2021 for this draft. And just a couple facts and figures for you. The current fee for obtaining a death certificate is $15 for the first copy and $10 for each additional copy. And in calendar year 2018, just under 37,000 copies of death certificates were issued in the state. So you can get a sense of how much revenue this would raise. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, committee, any questions for LSO in regards to the draft? Senator Scott, go ahead, sir.
Mr. Chairman, couple of questions. And one for not only Mr. Hewitt, but for anybody in the public that testifies. I'm understanding that most of the indigent burials are actually done currently through the health department. And that's the county's load on indigent burials these days is a relatively minor percentage of the total. I'd like further information on that. And second, I understand that what's happened to the funding in the health department is that the governor didn't veto the whole of the footnote. He left the money in, but subsequently what happened was the health department cut out its standard budget for indigent burials, and with the result that they don't have enough money to continue them through the whole biennium. Now, the language is pretty peremptory. I think they'll have to pay them, but I'm concerned about the consequences of that history. So, and I don't know whether LSO has any information on what's happened to the budget in the health department.
Mr. Hewitt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I have the budget open, and I'm looking at Governor Gordon's vetoes here. So section 332 imposed the death certification surcharge increase. And so there was a $5 surcharge increase in subsection A of that section 332. And then subsection B provide an appropriation of $123,000 to the Department of Family Services for burial and cremation expenses. And then the footnote 4 for the Department of Family Services, which provided the $123,000 appropriation to the department for these expenses, was also vetoed. And so that's what I show in the budget as vetoed by Governor Gordon.
So, Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead.
if I may follow up and see if I understand that. So the governor did veto that part of the budget. And then my information is the health department cut out theirs in the governor's 10% reductions. Do we know, is that correct?
Go ahead, Ted.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Scott, I do not know if the Department of Health's budget includes a reduction for that, but we can certainly find out.
Any follow-up, Senator Scott?
Mr. Chairman, if the world is the way I think it is, we'll need to amend this bill somewhat to take care of the problem. Even if the health department had a budget cut there, the language in their statute is that they shall pay. So I don't think they can get out of it. It would be a false reduction because it would simply wind up coming out of the big Medicaid line item, I think.
Yeah, go ahead, Mr. Hewitt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Senator Scott's absolutely right. There is the side of these burial expenses for the state. And that obligation goes to burials for folks who do receive power benefits, Medicaid benefits, supplemental security, income benefits at the time of death. What this draft doing, and Senator Scott mentioned this, is provide funding for the county obligation for indigent folks who counties have the obligation to pay for under 183504C. And because this idea came from the counties, this draft is providing a revenue source and a reimbursement mechanism to pay for the county burial expenses for those folks that they're responsible for. And I believe another committee is taking a look at the state obligation on this.
Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, Representative Duncan, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can't we alleviate that by including the state in this particular bill rather than a whole separate bill?
Mr. Hewitt.
Potentially, yes, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, go ahead, Chairman Scott.
Mr. Chairman, I agree with Mr. Hewitt on that, provided we do it at this meeting. If the bill were to be introduced the way it is written right now, without taking some account of this, then we might have a germaneness argument if we tried to do it just in session. So it's something we do need to put at least a placeholder in today. And there's a couple ways you can do it. I have a draft on one of them.
Okay. Chairman Landon, do you have a question?
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I'm just pursuing the conversation a little bit further. I appreciated Mr. Hewitt clarifying this breakdown of funding and budget issues, but my concern, Mr. Chairman, is that this supplants and doesn't end up I'd rather have it supplement, what we're trying to get done for our counties out there, and not just supplant. So I guess I'm still trying to get my arms around where the state piece ends and where the county piece is, and how we can incorporate the two. And it sounds like Senator Scott kind of has an idea of how we can do that.
Chairman Scott, go ahead.
Chairman, yes, there's two ways to do it. One is to provide that if the state doesn't have the funds, then the counties are responsible for those. And that would probably take effect given what I understand the health department has already done. The other is to put the health department in right with the counties. That's probably the simpler way to do it. And let them share in this reimbursement. One way or another, we need to get it covered, because right now, most of the indigent burials are people that were on Medicaid or SSI, or the power program's in there too, but it doesn't have, I suspect there's very few indigent burials coming out of that, just the nature of the clients they have. That's, you either have the state sharing in that, or you have the counties responsible for all of them, and all the money goes to the counties. It comes out about the same, whichever way you do it. But one way or the other, we need to, or we're going to have a problem.
Okay, any further questions for Mr. Hewitt? Not seeing any. We're gonna, any other comments from the committee before we move to public testimony? Not seeing any. I'm gonna go ahead and admit in Mr. Riemann and Ms. Kaiser, who both requested to testify. We're gonna go to Mr. Riemann first. I'm guessing he's representing the County Commissioners Association. Mr. Riemann, did you want to testify on this piece of legislation? Oh, you're muted, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm Jeremiah Riemann here representing the Wyoming County Commissioners Association. Really appreciate you taking up this bill. There's a little bit of lag there, but I think I've caught most of the discussion, and I'll try and answer some of the pieces here. First off, counties are responsible for covering all indigent burials, all non-Department of Family Services indigent burials or veterans burials. So all of those fall under county responsibility, and that's found in 18.3.504C. The Department of Family Services under 42.2.103C is responsible for indigent burials under the Power Program, Supplemental Security Income, and Medicaid. But that cap on those indigent burials, and you may hear from others, is set at a maximum contribution of $1,000. And currently, most indigent burials or burials at large cost more than $1,000. Under 1914-101, counties from their general fund are responsible for paying for indigent veteran burials. And in that portion of the statute, there's also a responsibility of the county to pay for transportation costs not to exceed $500. So that's some of the statutory background that does exist here. There's been some conversation this morning about the governor's veto. The governor did veto this provision of the budget bill. I wanted to just quickly note that his budget veto has in it the idea that he was concerned that this was legislating through the budget bill, which he found problematic. But he goes on to say that the idea of better accounting for the cost of burial or cremation for indigent people is noble, but I suggest that this work should come back in a separate bill in the future. So certainly the governor has indicated a willingness to consider this particular type of legislation. Mr. Chairman, based on our past work on this and what I know today, commissioners would be supportive of this piece of legislation and certainly appreciate your work to lessen the burden that does exist upon county commissioners to address indigent burials for which they have no ability to plan for or budget for in their particular work. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I'd be happy to stand for any questions.
Questions for Mr. Raymond? Yeah, Mr. Co-Chairman, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Riemann, thanks for your thoughts regarding the governor's veto, and I couldn't remember very well, so that's really helpful this morning that you reminded us. My question is, what is your sense of how much this fund that we are creating in this bill, is it going to be able to cover what takes place with our indigents every year? Any sense of how many of these we look at? If my mathematics says that this will generate something like $185,000, if I heard Mr. Hewitt correctly. Is that going to be enough to take care of what we're seeking to do here?
Mr. Raymond.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Landon, at this point in time, I don't have the specifics for you. I am working to try and get you better numbers around that. The indigent burials around the state do vary. The Fremont County certainly has higher expenses. Sheridan County has experienced a number of expenses in this space. Perhaps some others have some thoughts on that, but I certainly will bring that information if this bill does move forward so that you have that available to you.
Yeah, go ahead, follow up.
So, Mr. Chairman, just a quick follow-up regarding the veterans burials, Mr. Reedman. You touched on that a little bit. Am I to understand that our statutes indicate that we handle veterans burials, or is it just the indigent veterans burials? Can you clarify that for me?
Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Landon, in 1914-101, it's specific to veteran indigent burials, not burials at large as it relates to the county obligation. There may be a larger obligation that exists out there, but that's the specific obligation of the counties.
Thank you, Mr. Reedman.
Any other follow-up questions for Mr. Raymond and the County Commissioners Association? Seeing none. Thank you very much, Mr. Raymond. We're going to go to now to Ms. Kaiser with the Wyoming Funeral Directors Association. Ms. Kaiser, please go ahead.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, Mr. Chairman and committee. My name is Sherilyn Kaiser, and I'm representing the Wyoming Funeral Directors Association. And first of all, I'd like to thank you for bringing this bill forward. You know, as previous speakers have indicated, that we went through a process last year trying to find some funding for our indigent burial services. And we reached the veto, and we're hoping that we could find some kind of reimbursement funding, secure reimbursement funding for our practitioners during the interim session. We stand in support of this bill. We would like to see the inclusion of the Title 42, the responsibilities for the state as well for the reimbursement, primarily because for our practitioners, it's about $2,500 out-of-pocket expense for each indigent burial. In the way it works most of the time in every community is different, but on the average, when there's a decedent and our practitioners are called, our practitioners take the decedent into their care, and we don't know anything about their background, and it's generally we try to find family members and we work with the county coroner's office to go through that process. According to my members, about 90% of their indigent burials fall under Title 42. Reimbursement processes are different in every county. In some counties, there are no reimbursements. Other counties take care of indigent services, through their budget, and they have agreements with our practitioners. And so it just really does vary. But what we is consistent at this point is the association did receive a letter from the Department of Health and for the program that's administered by the Department of Family Services, that the burial programs fund and the appropriation to it, which is a little over $281,000, was eliminated from the DFS budget. And then further into the letter, they did tell us that the appropriation of $123,000 during the budget session, that they were going to maintain that one-time funding and have that available for reimbursement programs through the state of Wyoming. So that's kind of where we're setting at this point. We have a program, but we don't have an appropriation to the program. And when the one-time funding of $123,000 is eliminated, or spent, basically spent, then we just have a fund without funding. And so we are coming to you at this point to request that the Title 42 be included in this bill, so we can work on it and we can work on, you know, the expenses and the reimbursements and try to do some continuity around the state for the reimbursements for our practitioners. And I stand for any questions.
Questions for Ms. Kaiser? Seeing none. Thank you very much, Ms. Kaiser. Appreciate your testimony. Is there any other public testimony in regards to indigent burials? Mr. Fraser says no. Mr. Winnie, you want to jump in? No.
No, sir, Mr. Chairman.
All right. I get the opportunity to actually call out somebody in the audience. It's the first time for a little while. All right. So we're going to close public testimony on this draft committee. What is your pleasure?
Move the bill.
Moved by Representative Duncan. Is there a second? Second by Representative Aaron. All right, committee. The bill's been moved and seconded. Senator Scott, do you have any proposed amendments?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, and this is one of the options I discussed earlier. The amendment would be on page 2, line 2, delete the word county. On page 2, line 10, after 18.3504C, insert and to the department for indigent burial and cremation expenses for which the department is responsible pursuant to 42.2103C. Mr. Chairman, that's the amendment. If I get somebody second, I'll be happy to explain it.
Senator Nethercott has a second.
Is that the right page?
Yeah, and I'm going to go ahead and ask you to repeat. What page are you on, Senator Scott? Because I don't. You're either on the wrong page or on a different draft.
Oh yeah, I know it's page. I'm sorry, it's page 3, not page 2.
Okay, that makes a lot more sense. So just to repeat the amendment on page 3, line 2, strike the word county. Is that correct?
That's right.
And then what was the rest of the amendment?
On page 2, line 10, page 3, line 10, after 18.3504C, insert and to the department for indigent burial and cremation expenses for which the department is responsible pursuant to 42.2103C.
Mr. Hewitt, did you get all of that?
Chairman, I did. I would have a question or two regarding that.
Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead, Mr. Hewitt.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess my kind of broad question is, how would these funds be divided up between the counties and the state, essentially?
Senator Scott, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, as written, you'd handle it the same way that you do with the counties. They would apply as you described, and then it would depend on who applied for how much. And I suppose it'd be, if the funds weren't sufficient, you might have to have an allocation. Get 90% or 80% or whatever. But it would be the same mechanism that they essentially would be treating the department as if it was the 24th county.
Any other questions? Chairman Lannon, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, I guess in the back of my mind is whether or not the state agency would eat up a big portion of this budget, which I'm afraid is not going to be enough to cover all of our indigent burials in the first place. And what started out as an effort to try to keep our counties whole out there probably isn't going to reach as far. That's my only caution with what we're up to now. But maybe the chairman of labor can enlighten me further as to how much goes to the state agency, how much the counties can expect to get out of this. We set out to help the counties, really.
Chairman Scott, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, my information, and it's not perfect, and maybe the funeral directors would have better information. My information is that depending on how much the surcharge actually raises, it will probably cover most, but not all, somewhere in the 80 to 90% range of the total indigent burial expenses that we get here, given the limitations that are in the statute as to how much the department would have to pay. So yes, because the vast majority of the indigent burials are the state responsibility, the state would take the vast majority, but it would still solve most of the county's problems, as it would solve most of the state's problems with this area.
Further questions for the bringer of the motion? Representative Ayer, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Is it true, and this is maybe a question for Ted or for Mr. Riemann, is it true that the counties are responsible for anything above the $1,000 cap on the state-funded indigent burials?
Senator Scott, do you know that answer?
Mr. Chairman, if you look at the specifics, I think the answer is no. Right now, there's an exclusion on the counties. There's just an exclusion for the people that fall into these Medicaid and other categories.
Mr. Hewitt, did you want to add to that?
Mr. Chairman, I would just add that in 422103C, there is a sentence that states no board of county commissioners shall be responsible for any burial or cremation expenses in excess of the amount paid under this subsection, and that amount is set at $1,500.
Follow up? No. All right. Yeah, Representative Duncan, go ahead.
Sorry. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess I pose this thought to everyone isn't it better to have a reimbursement of some kind of portion versus nothing at all? I guess that's where I'm leaning and questioning that at least they're made partially whole if they're not going to be made completely whole if we don't have enough money. Especially with all of the belts being tightened and lack of funding at the state level, the municipalities and counties are not going to get, their cut. So getting something is better than nothing, I guess, is where I'm at on this.
Chairman Scott.
Mr. Chairman, I would very much agree with it, and that's basically what this amendment does. The risk is if we don't put the department as a potential recipient of some of this money, they'll have no budget. The language is that they shall pay. And I think the consequence of that, as it works out legally, would be they'd wind up paying whether they had a budget or not. And then we'd have a problem. Whether they could take it out of, I expect they could take it out of the Medicaid line item and we'll just blow a little hole in that and have to make it up. So if we want to solve the problem, I think this is the way to do it.
Further questions on the amendment? Seeing none. Question being called on the amendment. All those in favor, please signify by raising your hand in front of your camera. Okay, all those opposed, raise your hand in front of the camera. The amendment is adopted. All right, committee, any other amendments to the proposed legislation? Any other just, yeah, Chairman Scott, go ahead.
Just call the LSO's attention. I think that the amendment will require a minor adjustment to the title.
Mr. Hewitt?
Mr. Chairman, will do. I'd also note that page 3, line 7, I think a conforming amendment is needed to language says the state treasurer shall disperse funds within the account to counties, probably add the state in some way to allow the state treasurer to provide funding to both.
Is there a motion to add "and to the state" after counties on page 3, line 7?
So moved.
Moved by Representative Duncan. Is there a second? Second by Senator Nethercott. Any discussion in regards to the amendment? Seeing none. All those in favor, please raise your hand in front of your camera. All those opposed, raise your hand in front of the camera. Motion is adopted. Any other amendments to the legislation or discussion in regards to the legislation?
Question on the bill.
Question on the bill being called. Members, this will be a roll call vote because this is for final passage. We'll go ahead and go to that roll call now.
Mr. Chairman, housekeeping,
Yeah, go ahead, Chairman.
how you doing the microphone in this room?
So you just keep your microphone muted and the microphones up here will pick you up.
Okay, thank you.
And audio muted.
Yep, yeah, definitely keep your audio muted also on your laptop. All right, yeah, let's go ahead and call the roll. Mr. Hewitt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The motion is to sponsor 21 LSO 184 working draft 0.5 as amended. Senator Case.
Aye.
Senator Nethercott.
Aye.
Senator Schuler.
Aye.
Senator Scott.
Aye.
Representative Blackburn.
Aye.
Representative Clausen.
Aye.
Representative Clem.
No.
Representative Clifford.
Aye.
Representative Duncan.
Aye.
Representative Ayer.
Aye.
Representative Furphy.
Aye.
Co-Chairman Landon.
Aye.
Chairman Lindholm.
Aye.
Motion is adopted.
All right. Members, next topic is we're going to kick over to 21 LSO 183 cities, towns, and counties online postings. Ted, are you kicking the tires on that one also?
Chairman, I am, yes.
All right, go ahead, Mr. Hewitt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is 21 LSO 183 working draft 0.6. And this bill draft amends newspaper publication requirements for cities, towns, and counties. Starting on page 2 of the draft, the bill draft amends 15.1, 110. And currently under this section, cities and towns must publish meeting minutes and the titles of all ordinances passed in a newspaper, if there is a newspaper published in the city or town. If a newspaper is not published in the city or town, the city clerk has to post this information in his or her office for at least 10 days. The bill draft eliminates that newspaper publication requirement and imposes a new requirement. And that requirement is for cities and towns to post and maintain meeting minutes and ordinance titles on their websites. And if a city or town doesn't have a website, then the obligation would stay with the city clerk to post that information in his or her office. On page 3, in that subsection B, starting on line 8, you can see that cities and towns once each year must publish in a newspaper the names and salaries of full-time employees and elected officials, if there is a newspaper in the city or town. This bill draft, again, it eliminates that publication requirement and imposes a new requirement that cities or towns post this information on their official websites and maintain that information on their official website. Down at the bottom of page 3, you can see the bill draft opens up 183516 and on to page 4. Subsection A within that section is amended. And this section has to do with counties. So first amendments for cities and towns. And now we've moved to the counties. And this section contains similar newspaper publication requirements for counties as the previous section did for cities and towns. Again, this bill draft eliminates newspaper publication requirements for meeting minutes and imposes a requirement on counties to post and maintain this information on the official county website. On page 5, in subsection B, starting on line 8, the bill draft eliminates the requirements for counties to publish salary information for full-time employees and elected officials and imposes a new requirement that this information be posted and maintained on the county's official websites. And then on page 6, it's a little bit of cleanup in subsection F. And there's initially a conforming amendment, and then starting on line 6, the bill draft eliminates some obsolete dates relating to how counties have to notice how the public can access county information. Then line 14, on page 6, section 2 provides an effective date of July 1, 2021. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, questions for LSO committee? Any questions for LSO? Yeah, Senator Nethercott, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm trying to pull up right now, but perhaps Mr. Hewitt can help. There's a lot of effort in this area in the last couple of years concerning transparency in public records and the availability of those records. I know that we did work to create, in fact, over a decade ago, I believe through some of the efforts of Senator Case, had the Wyoming Administration and Information, or ANI, be obligated to be a record keeper of some of these records, and they have a website associated for that. And so just as an option, as an alternative placement, perhaps in lieu of the entity's official website or the local town clerk's office, that particular resource could also be an avenue for the publication of those minutes or records on the ANI site.
Mr. Hewitt.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Nethercott, I'm not familiar with that work that's been done over the last few years. Certainly, we can look into it more, and I'm sure other folks probably have more information on that than I do.
Mr. Chairman, follow up.
Go ahead.
Yeah, Mr. Hewitt, if you can kind of hustle and help me find that statutory section, and we can make it happen.
All right, we're hustling. Any other questions for Mr. Hewitt? Yeah.
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do have a question. The way I read it, and just correct me, maybe I was rushing through it. The way I read it is that the municipality or the county is no longer required to at least give the information to the newspaper. I see that it's not required to publish or print, pay for the print, but I didn't see where they're required to at least give it to them so that they can publish it, whether they choose to or not, at no expense to the municipality. So I'm curious, did I oversee that? Did I overlook that?
Mr. Hewitt.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Duncan, great question. So there are existing requirements in these two sections for the governments to provide a copy of this information to the newspaper. For cities and towns, it's on page 2, lines 15 through 18. It's the deleted language. The clerk of each city or town shall, within 12 days after adjournment of every meeting, furnish the newspaper a copy of the proceedings of the meeting. And similarly for counties, it's on page 4, line 16. It's a requirement for counties to furnish the paper with a copy of the proceedings. And the rationale here is that there's no longer a publication requirement. newspapers don't have to do this. Because the information would now be on a website, the newspaper could go find it there and publish it if it wanted to. But it just seemed to me that there wasn't a necessity to provide a copy of this document to the newspaper based on these changes. Now, with that being said, the committee could absolutely leave that in. You could still require the local governments to provide copies of their minutes to a newspaper to publish if they wanted to.
Thank you.
Further questions? Yeah, Senator Schuler, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I'm not sure if this question's for Ted or who, but I just kind of wondered the motivation behind the bill. I'm kind of concerned about, I know that if it came from the cities or the counties, I'd be interested in knowing. And I'd also be interested in knowing if it was strictly a cost saving issue or just what, because I do worry about, as Senator Nethercott mentioned, the transparency issues with a lot of folks who don't either have access to the internet or don't know how to use it properly and get their information from the printed deals. So I'm just wondering what the motivation came from on this bill.
My recollection on that, Senator Schuler, is we had a mayor testify a couple meetings ago from a small town, and I forget which town that is. Maybe co-chairman could, was it Lingle? It was Lingle. Right. As the mayor of Lingle testified about some of the expenses that these small towns are seeing and what can be done to alleviate some of those expenses. And that's where the draft legislation floated up, was from that idea. Co-chairman Landon, go ahead.
Well, and Mr. Chairman, thank you. That's exactly where I was going. And then in addition to that, Senator Scott and some others on the committee throughout the interim had conversations related to what we might consider doing for our counties and our cities and towns, knowing that we're entering a climate that's going to reduce budgets all across the board. And so I think this is a remedy that the committee came up with in September to take a look at. And it is a cost-saving measure. I think both the senators have alluded to the fact that we just completed a lot of great work on transparency sorts of issues the last 2 years. And so that's the balance point with this piece of legislation. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Scott, question?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, first to comment, Chairman Landon's exactly right. This was an effort to try to cut the expenses down because the cities and counties, they're going to have the same thing happen to their revenue that's happening to ours. And we're going to be in a poorer position to give them the assistance we've given in the past. The question I would like to pose, not so much to LSO, but to any of the public that testifies, I don't have a feeling for the magnitude of the savings, would be interested in that. And it would be easy to amend the bill by way of compromise to require the minutes and the titles of the ordinances to continue to be published, but to tell them to put those on the website so they're available both ways. And then to continue the rest of the bill, get rid of the publication requirements for all the salaries. Frankly, I think that's more esoteric and people can find that in the website. That'll satisfy any need. But the minutes and the ordinances are probably of more general interest to the public and maybe should continue to be published. And I was wondering if we compromise things that way, what would be the consequences?
Mr. Hewitt, do you want to jump in on that?
Mr. Chairman, I apologize. I was working on Senator Nethercott's request, and I believe that the reference that Senator Nethercott was making was to 9.2.1036, which is a Department of website to permit taxpayers to view and track the use of taxpayer dollars by making participant state entities and local government entities public financial information available on the website. I apologize, could Senator Scott pose this question again?
I think Senator Nethercott has the answer. Go ahead, Senator Nethercott.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chairman. I think Senator Scott really posed that more to the audience, the public comment when they speak, but I'll let Senator Scott maybe nod his head if that's what he intended as opposed to LSO. Yeah. So Mr. Hewitt is correct. That is the statute that I found as well. Just to kind of back it up and understand the genesis of this particular bill draft, I think it's a revenue saving intent, right, as a result of the cost of publishing in local newspapers, particularly its burden on small communities. And so one solution, in having addressed this issue in the last couple of years, was the fact that, again, 10 years ago or more, legislation was passed having the Department of Administration and Information, which seems to be an appropriate agency, to be responsible with creating a website even that time ago for kind of a one-stop shop for the submission of all government entities' financial information so that all of their budgets could be submitted then. So pretty remarkable work, even long before the trend of transparency in elections, but we have that platform. And so one thought that I had as we continue to grapple with this piece is to allow for the Department of A&I to continue to use that website as an online repository for other types of public records information that those entities would like to submit. Again, that's a savings of resources to these local entities that are really struggling with some of these publication costs. And I do understand the concerns about, a lot of folks don't have access to the internet, but a lot of folks do, and most do. And I do think that this doesn't preclude them from still going into the government entity you're asking for a public records request, but it does allow for the elimination of potentially those unnecessary costs in light of alternative publication avenues. And so kind of consolidating that effort into one website, which is A&I, which already exists, is, I think, a pretty prudent course for the state's resources, both for state agencies and local government entities to use if they so choose, if they don't have their own website. So just something for the committee to think about as we drive this conversation.
Senator Scott, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, let me restate my question. And I don't care whether it's answered by LSO at this point or by somebody in the audience. How much money is this bill going to save the cities and counties on either a biennial or an annual basis? And I don't care which state, as long as you tell us what you're talking. And how much of that is eliminating the salary publication requirements, and how much of that is eliminating the minutes and ordinances requirements? Because that doing one instead of both would be a potential compromise. So we need to know what kind of money we're talking about. If it's trivial, then continue the publication requirements. I don't think it is trivial, but let's find out how much are we going to save our cities and counties, because that's the key to what we're trying to achieve here.
Representative Blackburn, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Is my mic on?
You got it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Information I've been given by local newspapers here is Laramie County, it's 0.03% is what the cost is to them. That's pretty minimal, I think. And the other information I was given was around the state, it's about 0.5% would be the cost. That's pretty trivial, I think. Secondly, I guess on my mind is we talk about some people have internet access, some don't. Most people are not going to go into a government agency unless they're looking for something specific. And then for them to find the information they need sometimes is hard and they give up. So that's the other thing that a newspaper, I think, affords the common citizen for their transparency in Laramie County, if no place else. I guess the rest of the state would be the same. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, question.
Go ahead, Senator Case.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So Representative Blackburn, what are those percentages of?
Excuse me?
You said you gave numbers in percentages.
Last year, Laramie County spent 0.03% of their total budget on
Total budget.
on publishing all required public notices.
Okay, thank you, Representative. Percent of total budget.
Yes, Mr. Case, Senator Case.
All
Mr.
right.
Chairman,
Yeah, go ahead, Representative Duncan.
while we're sharing, thank you, Mr. Chairman. We received testimony that it was upwards of $3,000 for a small community of 500 people a year in their budget to print these notices. Later, the newspaper came into my office and told me that it was significantly less. In fact, come to find out, they received numerous discounts across the entire area. So I don't know what to believe at this point, based on what Representative Blackburn gave his information and what the newspaper gave me, is that it's significantly less than $1,000 a year versus the 3,000. So just for context.
Right. You know, and the surprising part about this whole deal is how many times we debate this thing.
I know.
I mean, we've gone over this road. I mean, I've only been in the legislature for 6 years, but Senator Case, how many times have you seen this, a version of this bill?
Well, I think the last time where there was a rework was corporations. We had the newspapers and the government folks sit down together and they came up with a compromise, and we reduced the number of publication requirements is what happened. But that's been several years ago. That was a meeting in, I'd say 8 years ago.
Hmm.
And we kind of said we'd hold off for a while, but it's been a while.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, go ahead,
Question.
Representative Duncan.
Quick question. So Senator Case, do you think the common issue here is people get riled up when it comes to the publication of salaries and names versus the information of the meetings and minutes?
Absolutely.
So, Mr. Chairman, I think there's two things going on there. There's always been the salaries and names, and we've handled that in different ways, sometimes not requiring simultaneous publication, but it's moving towards more public. I think it's just the legal notice requirements is really at the root of this, and the cost of that as the technology has changed and the times have changed. You know, we all know newspapers aren't what they used to be, and they're struggling. They're definitely, every one of them is struggling to hang in there. And this is an important revenue source for them. I have to look, what is our job? What is our job in the face of this terrible financial crisis that we're all going to be seeing? And it's going to affect our sister local governments proportionally, even possibly more than the state. So, and, you know, is this information available to the public? Are there alternative ways? And can people without internet obtain this information cheaply and effectively, either through their libraries or through the source? You know, the governments have to provide it as well. It seems like this is on the cusp of changing technology. I mean, maybe the technology is already way changed, and we're just trying to make the requirements match what's happened, really. So,
Quick follow-up.
Go ahead, Representative Duncan.
So one of the counters, I've had several people come into my office saying that they don't have internet or they don't
right.
go online, but they have an iPhone in their hand. And I look at them and I explain to them that's more powerful than my laptop.
Yeah.
So I'm struggling with what is our position? What is our job? So I have the same difficulty, I guess, in this issue.
And Mr. Chairman, we all have an interest in having the public be well informed and transparency and being able to find out about their government. Is this an essential piece of making that happen or not? Is it more cost effective to do it differently?
Right. Senator Nethercott, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chairman. Yeah, I've struggled with this issue too. I have had a close relationship with newspapers over the course of years and understand the challenge they face and the importance in our communities. But I recall as being a member of this committee, this is in individual legislators' bills as well. I mean, I've dealt with this, it feels like every year I've been elected. One particular testimony that I recall that I just found dangerous was from the Press Association and their representative, who discussed kind of their recognition of the changing times and changing technologies, and that they offered to create a website as well, with the requirement of government entities to publish on their website. And, you know, I appreciate the opportunity provided to governments, but I'm not sure government's in a position to provide a direct line to private business, and the danger that that presents, even when it is, you know, theoretically the fourth arm of government and effectuates the ability for government to be transparent. You know, that was a pretty remarkable statement. And I thought any other private entity making that particular demand or request would be top of the fold headline, but certainly not for them. And so I have been struck by that, and struck by that ever since, that criticism about the lack of government efficiency, and we're having to rift positions and cut departments and cut programs for people, but certainly never for newspapers. And that's hard for me to say, obviously, right? But that is a reality that I think we're all faced with as we move forward.
Co-Chairman Lanning, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. And boy, I really appreciate those words from Senator Nethercott, and a little bit of the history from Chairman Case. This is a tough one for me too. Many of you know that I began my professional career as a newspaper journalist. And so my heart is very much with that part of the world. And I will say this, I do think, not so much in my district, but in a lot of districts out across our state, I think that newspapers are still a very important part of those communities. That makes this a little tougher because, you know, this is the first in 3 days of us having issues like this, where progress is kind of banging at the door of what we've always done, whether it's liquor laws that we're going to take up later, or whether it's wind or solar, or so I guess that's what we do. You know, we try to decide where we are with things, where progress has taken us. And this is a tough one, but honestly, I think we know as we reduce these budgets out across the board, and there's more coming, it's going to have an impact on a lot of things. And this is a substantial amount. I can remember working at the college here in our community way back when. This line item that college spends with the newspaper just to publish legals is well up into the 5 digits. So it's a substantial amount as you look at whether it's the town of Lingle or a college here in this community or wherever. So anyway, Mr. Chairman, that's the crux. That's the hinge point. It's going to be a tough deal.
Senator Scott, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, I've done some very, very crude calculations. I think we're talking with this bill somewhere between $500,000 and $1 million in spending, and I wouldn't want to be held to that, but I think that's the order of magnitude we're talking about. Certainly, if we bring this bill forward, we'll need a better estimate to deal with it responsibly at the session.
Further comments? Representative Blackburn, go ahead. I'll remind everybody that I think we're still communicating with Mr. Hewitt in regards to questions for the bill. Go ahead, Representative Blackburn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, I've really enjoyed this discussion. I think we're not working the bill, but if there's people out there in the public that needs to testify, why don't we listen to them and try to make a decision to table it or pass it or something?
Okay, thank you. I don't see anybody else raising their hand to ask questions. Thank you very much for your presentation, Mr. Hewitt. At this time, we're going to go to public testimony. And our first one, actually, Mr. Frazier, did you want to testify on this?
Yes, please.
Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and bring you up first if you want to come up to the front, please. And then we're going to let some more folks into the room. So go ahead and sit down and provide us with your testimony, please, Mr. Frazier. Yes, sir.
Proceed through the sanitizer.
Yeah, proceed through the sanitizer. It's like a dunk tank for cattle. We've got all in the back.
Sounds great. Am I recognized?
Yeah, go ahead. And
am I mic'd? Can I be heard?
Yeah, there's a microphone right above you, so you're good to go. You got to mention who you are, who you're with, even though we all know that.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the record, David Fraser, Executive Director, Wyoming Association of Municipalities. I appreciate the committee dealing with this. I know for most, if not all of you, this isn't the first time that you've dealt with this topic. I do want to begin my testimony by coming out firmly in support of freedom of the press and firmly in support of transparency for local governments. Having said that, I don't believe that this bill infringes on either of those. I do probably want to begin. I wasn't going to begin this way, but numbers have come up, and I sought some numbers myself. That might not surprise you, but I requested to my members to send me how much they were spending and what percentage of their general fund expenditures that was, and the reason I asked for general fund is because that's the fund that bears these administrative costs. You could get into a discussion of total budget and all that stuff and how it relates to the enterprise funds and et cetera. But I asked for a percentage of general fund. And what I got, I'll give you, and I didn't hear from all my members, but I think I heard from enough to give us a little flavor of what this is financially. Let me point out before I read a couple of these that this kind of struck me as I looked at this as kind of the equivalent of a regressive tax on the small communities. And I'll tell you what I mean by that. In Casper, for example, it was $40,000 in their general fund budget for that, which is 0.1%, 0.1%, which is the smallest one I have, by the way. So I don't know where some of these other numbers are coming from, but so that's 0.1% for Casper. But if as you move down the populations, you get to a Torrington, who spends $35,333 or 0.52% of their general fund budget, 0.5%. On down to an Upton, a town of Upton, which spends $5,100 a year on it, which doesn't sound like very much money in the numbers you guys often discuss, but for Upton, that's 1% of their 1% of their general fund budget. And again, 1% doesn't sound like a lot, but if you're a community that's trying to figure out how to cut 20% out of your general fund budget, 1% is significant. That is a big deal. So along with that, I would maybe address really quickly Chairman Scott's proposal of a compromise. And of course, as these things go through the process, they usually end up in some sort of compromise. I would assert that this bill already is, in its current form, represents a compromise in that it doesn't discuss all the things that we spend on publications. There still be all the legal notices and all those kind of things that we're not discussing here. So let me back up from that to what I was going to talk about. I appreciate what the committee has said that in terms of how technology is changing, and it's interesting because you guys, I'm not sure there's ever been a period in history where technology is changing so rapidly. as it is right now. So you get the good fortune of dealing with that. Yeah. Yeah. Is it, but anyway.
Not being logical here.
Yeah. And at any rate, I didn't look, I should have looked to see when this, these publication notices were first required. But my bet is that it not only preceded the internet, it probably preceded television and radio as well. At one point in our state, in our country, the world for that matter, really newspapers were the primary way of getting information out to the public. And I think that's why these things were put in here. I would also mention that it doesn't, back to my earlier statement, it doesn't infringe on freedom of the press. This is information the press will still have, and they certainly can publish if they choose to. In addition to printing the minutes, and most cities send what they call action minutes, which really don't tell a lot of the story. It kind of tells, what the motion that passed, who made the motion and what passed, and not a lot of the flavor of the conversation. Along with that, most of the local papers attend those meetings and write. So in the very publication where you're having the minutes published, you're actually having an article which actually paints a broader picture of what happened there. And in fact, back to the technology thing, a lot of the cities are streaming these meetings. And with the streaming, of course, they're archiving them then. So you not only have the opportunity to watch it live from the comfort of your own living room, but you can go back and watch it, on your own schedule. And I think that in terms of the transparency of the local government, I think that's a much bigger step than anything we could publish, or even a story we could write about it. Again, I think it's important that we have, that reporting done. But again, people don't have to rely on that as they once did. You can go watch with your own eyes and listen with your own ears to what's taking place there. So I will tell you that to us, this is just a simple financial issue. It's a matter of what we're required to spend, and again, like a lot of the things I talked to you about, it does hit the smaller communities a lot harder than the larger communities. And I will tell you that we have way more small communities than large communities in Wyoming, as you know. So again, I don't believe that this hampers freedom of the press. I actually believe it may be lending itself toward more transparency, and I would encourage the committee to move the bill forward. And I would certainly stand for any questions that you may have.
I guess I have some questions, Mr. Fraser, in regards to these publication requirements. Certainly the towns do bear brunt of that, and that is the organization that you represent. Is there any interest in your organization working with some of the other entities that are under these requirements? It's my understanding that, for example, and I just got some communication about this under 21.3.110A2 that requires warrants and over $500 to be published within 30 days of a meeting by school districts. Also 21.3.110A16, I think that is, requires a notice to be published at least 2 times per year for notice of school board meetings and availability of minutes. So they're hit by these requirements also. Has there been any conversation that's happened between your organization and the school district association as far as working on a general piece?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have had, of course, in another committee, the Judiciary Committee, we've had a lot of interaction with the other associations, including the School Board Association, talking about public meetings and public records, which of course relates to this. And we have had some peripheral discussion about this as part of that, and more specifically, I guess, one of the things that we've been seeking is which is not contained in this bill, but the section concerning it is, and that is that printing the names, positions, salaries, etc., that not all public entities are created equal in that requirement either. And our position has been that we'd like to not have the names published, and our reason for that is in part, we think that could be could include personal safety issues, but we don't believe that publishing the name with that, and we're fine with the publishing requirement of the salaries and all that stuff. We believe it should be by position, and we don't believe that we think that's still transparent. You can look and see what the city's paying on payroll and to what position they're paying and everything without having to print the street cleaner operator's name in the paper. I do, as I've testified before this interim committee previously, I was a city manager much of my career. My salary was always printed, not just in this form, but in a story. It would usually when I was hired, it was atop of the full story that included my salary, and that's just part of what I signed up for in that position. I'm not sure that as you move down the org chart that it's that important for people to know the names, and so for that reason, we'd still like to see that be changed, although that's not contained in this draft here.
Representative Duncan, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Being the devil's advocate on the other side, I've had people come and complain to me. So I'd like to know what your response to this would be. So you have Joe Smith, the street cleaner, whatever, that you suggested. By knowing his name and his salary, and he gets paid X amount of money, and I'm driving through town and I know Joe personally, and so I now see how much he's making, and I see he's sitting around a lot rather than doing his job. So the people have come to me and said, it's important for me to know that we're wasting money because Joe's just sitting around and he's not actually working. What's your response to that?
Poor Joe.
I know it's poor Joe, but but that's some of the complaints I get, that's why we need to have those names.
Yeah, you raise an interesting point, and
Go ahead, Mr. Fraser.
I'm sorry. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I only get to do this for a couple more days. I gotta give you a hard time.
Yeah, absolutely. No, you get to keep me honest here. I appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, through the chair. Representative Duncan, you raise one of the points you made, I don't even know if you meant to, is that in a lot of our communities, there's only 6 people that work for the city, and everybody knows who those are anyway. One of my favorites is that when you live in a small town, you don't have to use your turn signal because everybody knows where you're going. Local government workers, especially those that work out in the public like that, take a lot of those kind of criticisms. And, sometimes it's warranted. Sometimes you need to, go talk to an employee. Sometimes the community just doesn't understand what they're really seeing. I remember my dad, who was an REA manager, much like Representative Era. I remember him telling me a story about a complaint that he got that why does it take 6 bucket trucks to do a job? And as he kind of got to the bottom of what they had seen is 6 bucket trucks all leave from the shop on the same road, but 10 miles later they all went different directions to different jobs. And so in that case, you know what I mean? The people looked at the people like these 6 trucks caravanning to whatever job it was, and they just didn't understand what was behind that. So part of the criticism, often the criticism that public employees take is because the public just doesn't understand the nature of the job. But sometimes somebody's goofing off and needs to be talked to. I think that again, I don't know how publishing the name in the paper would affect that example. You'd still know what the street sweeper operator made. And if you saw him goofing around, even if you didn't know his name, you'd probably take the same complaint.
Representative Clem, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So based on the current reading of the bill, if there was a community or a town or that wanted to go ahead and publish this information in the newspaper, this would not preclude them from doing that. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah, I believe that's correct.
Okay. And
you're the chair. I believe that's correct.
All right.
Well, it's still probably correct, but to the chair.
Yeah.
Okay.
You're the chairman, I think is what you meant to say, Senator Case.
I did.
Go ahead.
I love having in-person meetings, Mr. Chair.
I know, this is so much more fun. It's easier to give each other a hard time. And
For your last meeting, it's certainly appropriate.
I think so. Yes, Senator Scott, or Representative. Cruz, go ahead.
Thanks for the demotion or promotion, however you look at it. I'm just trying to work through this in my mind, Mr. Frazier's kind of speaking out loud. I know with our current fiscal outlook as a state and also municipalities, I know there's talk about raising revenues. There's talk about looking at ways to fund, the functions of government. I look at what we're doing here, and it almost seems to be like almost a subsidy that we're giving to newspapers through the municipalities. I can understand why they would be very much opposed to this because it directly affects them. Yet I don't see how transparency would be hindered. In fact, let me ask you, I guess, along these lines. I know transparency has been a big buzzword for many years in government, and I can speak for just observing my own community and how they have taken, the city council and Gillette in particular has taken a very strong stance at trying to use social media and their own website to really make sure that things are transparent. And they're not even using traditional media as far as newspapers. They're doing that on their own. And I know that comes at considerable expense as well. Care to take a stab at what kind of, because we're talking about them making the efforts to be more transparent. And I'm just curious as to what that costs the average Wyoming municipality in order to take those extra efforts to make things transparent, in addition to posting things in a newspaper. Want to take a stab at that?
Mr. Frazier, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't have numbers on that with me. That's something I certainly could look at. But it's, you bring up, it's amazing what technology really can do for us. And some of the smart cities technology that's out there is phenomenal in terms of information that the public entity can collect and push out. And we're even seeing, some in my former life, we actually had an app that somebody could take a picture of a pothole in the app and get that submitted straight to the Public Works Department, which isn't a transparency thing. It's kind of working in reverse, but technology, it's amazing what we can do with technology. And yeah, and I think, thank you for that point, because I think that illustrates how our communities really do support transparency. And frankly, as I've worked in local government, one of the frustrations that I often hear from local elected officials is that people don't pay enough attention. That, you know what I mean? That they wish that they could, that people would pay a little more attention and be a little more involved and understand at a deeper level what's going on in their local government. So.
Follow up?
No, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions, committee? Yep, Senator.
Chairman.
I think he's muted.
Yeah, no, he is. I'm just willing to let him run.
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah, go ahead, Senator Scott.
back on the bill, if we were to pass this bill as it stands right now, how much would we save the cities, towns, and counties every year? Do we have a figure on that?
Mr. Frazier.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through the chair to Senator Scott. I don't have, like I said, I did ask our members. I don't have an aggregate total on that. That's something we could certainly work on, is reaching out and trying to get that number from everybody so we could aggregate a total.
Okay. Any further questions, committee? I'm not seeing any. Mr. Frazier, thank you very much for your testimony. Really appreciate it. You'll stick around for the rest of the meeting. We've got some other things that I'm sure will affect local municipalities.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you. All right, committee, going back to our list here. We've got some other folks that would like to testify. In particular, Darcy Hoffland. Darcy, are you prepared to testify at this time? Darcy, are you there?
I'm here. Sorry about that. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, committee. My name is Darcy Hoffland with the Wyoming Press Association. Jonathan Downing is also here on this meeting on the behalf of the Press Association. I just want to say that, we believe that requiring publication of notices in local independent third-party newspapers with that financial and civic interest is the best method for ensuring public notices run in accordance to the law. It's the best practice for verification and accountability. And, we think that, what Senator Scott said is that we would urge the committee prior to considering taking a service already being provided by private sector Wyoming Main Street business and moving that responsibility to the public sector to require the local governments to demonstrate beyond a doubt that they can provide the same level of service or better to their constituents and do that service more efficiently while reaching the large number of Wyoming citizens that our newspapers and our newspaper websites do. So when I did send out some research about what was spent for the year 2019-2020 fiscal year on public notices. That information, because it was the best way to do it, includes all notices that published for those entities within a year. So it wasn't just salaries, it wasn't just counties, it wasn't just salaries, it wasn't just minutes. Also, this includes maybe what was done above what is statutorily required. So it includes everything. For example, Kevin Olson is the publisher of Teton Media Group. That's the Wyoming Jackson Hole News and Guide. He told me that to publish the salaries twice a year for the city was like $430. So obviously that's just for that. So Representative Duncan, if you were hearing some different numbers, that could be where that discrepancy was coming from. But what we were seeing from the sample that we received on the information that I've collected so far is that what that is costing to provide that permanent record is less than 0.5% of the city and county annual operating budgets. So that's the data that we collected. I did send that out. We just think that, we're providing a vital service to their constituents, but also to these governments. We're giving them this third-party check, which protects them from accusations of not releasing proper information or having that information changed. So notices published in print can't be altered, and we provide notarized affidavit to the fact that this entity did provide proper notification to the public. So I think that there is a potential, after talking to our attorney, Bruce Motes, for duplicate affidavits should these postings be digital only. From the person who goes online through their mobile phone or on their computer, and they're searching out, maybe they're not even, web savvy, but, they're saying that this information wasn't available according to statute. And then maybe you have the city, the IT person giving affidavit that yes, that they did post it, but maybe that information was in queue. Maybe the internet was down that day, their site was down that day, there was something wrong with the server. But when it's in print, and that litigation happens, it's really hard to do that. And so we think that that's an additional service that we provide with the public notice. besides the transparency aspect. So, with that, we would ask the committee to consider if these notices cease to be published in newspapers and only posted on government websites, who then is liable or negligent if errors such that, that I mentioned, if something is down or it's hacked, is there going to be a government recognized point person for each entity and that's going to be accountable and carrying out that duty? That's just one question that we had for the committee to consider. Also, we're just concerned that well, we feel that there's a distinct difference between posting information online and which is making it available, which is, an important aspect of transparency, but there's a big difference from giving public notice, that there's a difference between searching for information online and discovering that information about what's happening by publishing in a newspaper whose business is to keep the public informed. So we're concerned that these public notices will be out of sight, out of mind, should this bill be enacted. The editor of the Saratoga Sun recently sent me some data by the Pew Research Center, and they found that 13% of adult internet users visit a local, state, or federal government website. In the state of Wyoming, newspaper readership in print and online is over 70%. I tried to look at some of the government websites. I had to ask some of the publishers for help on trying to find some of the information. Two examples that I'll give you. In the town of Hewlett, I believe it was, if you click on minutes, you will find two options, January of 2017 and February of 2017. And then if you go across the state to Uinta County, there are no minutes posted for the year 2020. So just keep that in the back of your mind. Also, what we do, and Senator Nethercott alluded to this, but I think we do it for a different reason than maybe she thinks, but we just believe that people in Wyoming should have as much information as possible. So in order to give more notice, the Wyoming Press Association has made readily available on its own. We paid for the creation and the maintenance of an online searchable archive, a repository for all the public notices appearing in newspapers so they can be searched online for free. And that's wyopublicnotices.com. And so, we maintain that on a monthly basis so that if there are people who actually want to search that information out for something specific, it's easily accessible, a one-stop shop. I think those are all the points. I'm sorry, I was trying to be brief, but I don't think I was. But obviously we are opposed to this draft bill, and I'd stand for any questions, or also maybe if Jonathan would like to add anything to, or Mr. Chairman, if you'd like to call on it.
Thanks for the permission. Mr. Co-Chairman, go ahead.
Mr. Co-Chairman, thank you. Darcy, I appreciate it. I was with you all the way through, and I've already said that I have a background in newspapers, so I get it. I just did a little walking around the other day in my neighborhood, and the newspaper is not delivered anymore on our entire block. Even one of my best friends on the block, we used to get our papers together. We'd walk out and get them. Well, first of all, they don't arrive until noon the following day in my community anymore, but all of us have gone electronic. And so I guess I would be interested in your comments regarding, I'm going to log on to a newspaper website to get my newspaper now. By the way, I sure miss the hard copy print of my newspaper, but I'm online now. But what would be the difference with just logging on to the A&I website, as Senator Nethercott has pointed out, to get whatever information I need? I guess that's the piece that I'm really struggling to defend, is if we're going to get online for our newspapers, we're sure going to be able to just go over to a second website and get the legal notices, no?
Mr. Chairman, Co-Chairman Landon, Co-Chairman Lindholm, I understand what you're saying, and I can tell you that we are required to demonstrate readership. We have to provide records of paid subscribers. We have to maintain postal permits. We have to submit to outside subscription audits. This includes page digital subscriptions, maybe what you're talking about. So digital replicas of the print product. So that print product is, there's still that permanent record, but we also provide that tech for people who want to consume that information digitally. Like I said, I would argue that there's a difference between having to search that information out. I was trying to find Crook County information on minutes the other day, and I called Mr. Moberg up there. He's the publisher, and I said, I can't find this. You said it was there. You said it's current. It's awesome, but I cannot find it. And so he had to give me directions. So you do have to, have intent. You have to search this information out. Information is discovered in newspapers, whether you're receiving it digitally or if you're getting it in the print copy. And again, like I said, we provide for notices to make sure that they are being done in accordance to the law. We have a financial civic interest. This is our business. And so we're going to make sure that it's done properly within the law and that information is out there in many ways as possible, whether it's digitally or in print. So as many people have access to it.
Okay. Not seeing any further questions. I could be, Senator, Representative Clem, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So similar thing. My community's newspaper went from paper copies 6 days out of the week to now only paper copies just twice a week, and so most everything is online. And I'm just thinking through this a little bit right now because I understand that maybe there's not uniformity from city to city or town to town in regards to public notices. I would point out, I don't believe that there is a specific requirement now for counties to do that on their own website, which is what this bill contemplates, that they would have to do that. And you raised something, this is what my question goes to, is, if a city or a town did not abide by the law, if this were to be enacted, and they failed to do that, I think there is recourse. Not only that, but who do we hold accountable? And I think the public can hold their elected officials accountable. They can go to their city councilman or their mayor. They can say, hey, what's going on here? You're not following the law, and there can be recourse that way. I struggle though, right now as it currently is, we state by law that these public notices have to be made in newspapers. We're making cities and counties spend money at newspapers. And if a newspaper were to drop the ball for some reason, I struggle to see how that media outlet would be held accountable, particularly if there's a monopoly, as far as that news media outlet. I don't know where else you'd go. And so I struggle with that. Perhaps you can speak on that a little bit. And then one final thing, and I'll be quiet, and that is, even if this bill goes through, there's nothing that precludes newspapers from publishing this information. Am I wrong? I mean, you all could do that. I mean, the difference would be is whether or not we make cities pay for it or not, but newspapers could still provide that service if they so chose to. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Hoffman.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Clem, we consider ourselves a watchdog. So, we keep our eye out for that information. Is it being provided? Is it not? As the fourth estate, we feel that that's our duty to watch over government and making sure that they're disseminating and providing that information, that it's getting to us, that we're holding them accountable. that it's not being altered. So, you know, it's, I guess I would say, you know, it's not really, I don't feel like it's newspapers versus the internet. I feel like it's newspaper websites against government websites. And I guess, you know, you're right that they would be, you know, the government could be held accountable for that. And if they're, you know, I'm just wondering what kind of, you know, would that be potentially costly litigation? I don't know, but I do believe that we are an independent contractor for the government for disseminating the people's information in this regard. So again, if you're looking to take this out of the hands of the private sector completely and newspapers, I mean, I don't think it's fair to say that, you know, we should take on all the costs that we normally do and provide this information free as a Main Street business. You know, we do use those public notices a lot to do stories, to follow up. If I could, I received an example from the Grable Standard that I would like to read to the committee, if that would be okay.
So we're running up against the clock, Ms. Hoffman.
Okay. You know, it's just, they just recently published the notices in August, and some information was found out, which, you know, the public was upset about, and the city council ended up taking action based on that. And it was believed that if that information wouldn't have been put out there, if it wouldn't have been published in the Grable Standard, nobody would have known about what was going on with the overtime, and the city wouldn't have taken action to save the city money. So it was a really good example. I'd be happy to send it to you later if you would like to take a look at it. But I just think that before you move forward, these governments should really demonstrate, they should have a considerable burden of proof when it comes to their claim that they can do this service, that they can provide the video archive and the live streaming and maintaining these you know, public notices and having the staff to do it, that they should be able to say that they can do this service, you know, more efficiently and better than us, you know, before it moves forward. That's all I'm asking in that regard. I don't think that the cost that we're seeing really affects that overall annual operating budget compared to, you know, what we do in regards to public notices.
Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, and briefly, and then we're going to go to Mr. Downey. Go ahead, Representative Duncan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just something that between your response and Representative Clem's back and forth brought to my attention. Isn't it the job of freedom of the press and the newspaper to publish things and investigate things in journalism if government's not being forthright, if government's not being honest? And isn't that kind of the idea of press, that you're going to publish it and make it an article or a story as news, correct?
Go ahead, Ms. Hoffland, quickly.
Yes, absolutely. Of course. You know, when we get those public notices, when they're made available to us, a lot of times that will happen. And investigative reporting will happen. If those notices go onto a government website and government is monitoring that, government's, you know, responsible for that information that's up there, you know, I guess I would have to say that we, you know, not that we don't trust the government, that information is accurate and correct, and that, you know, we're, you know, going to be required to go get it, and that it's going to be up there correct. And yes, it is our responsibility to look into information when it's, you know, in front of us. That's absolutely correct. And as the Fourth Estate, you know, we believe it's our duty to provide that information, despite what could be, you know, not given to us at that point. So that's correct. We're just, we've been doing this job for 130 years. We think we've been doing it well, putting public notices and what in our newspapers and on our websites now and in our archive. We think we're doing a good job of it. We don't think that cost is, it's such a small fraction to the city, so that we can get that information out to your constituents. We think it's a service that it's a part of our business. It's part of the business we do.
All right. Very much for your testimony, Ms. Hoffland. Mr. Downing.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Jonathan Downing on behalf of Wyoming Press Association. Don't want to rehash some of what you've already heard. Do want to cover just briefly. I want to say thank you to the tall senator from Natrona County for his comments on how much money will this be saving government. And I think that's the more critical piece, because we really don't have that number right in front of us right now. If you were going to look at and for some of those who have been on appropriations or in appropriations committee before, looking at the hourly rate for ETS as well as ANI, also looking at some of those internal reports on responsiveness from that agency with respect to individual state agencies as well as some of those other areas, and does making this shift to shifting this essentially to the public sector from the private sector, do we realize cost savings there? Do we also realize long-term impacts of ensuring that information is going to be readily accessible? Because we're talking essentially just off the cuff, 99 municipalities, 23 counties. Let's say we're doing it twice a month. You're looking about 3,000 uploads, and then throw that into your server space and your data farm. It's as far as you can keep on adding that up. But the point being is that we don't have the data there right now at this point, as far as a fiscal note to say that this is going to be a less costly alternative by doing let's just put it on the web. And then having the guarantee that what's on the web is going to be accurate, and then how long do you keep it on the web, and so on and so forth. The bigger issue, though, I would say, is looking at the fourth estate and looking back to the role of the press when the founders had, not to get too heavy on Constitution right now for some of the constitutional scholars out there, but when you start to look at that role in there in partnership with government, and in partnership with ensuring that the public's aware of what's going on. That's where I get concerned, because you've seen me in front of this committee before, as well as other committees on transparency, and the desire to ensure that while we still maintain transparency, we obviously still have concerns on cost savings, and that's where we don't fully know what those cost savings are right now. But with that, Mr. Chairman, I'd be open for any questions.
Questions for Mr. Downing? Being none, thank you very much, Mr. Downing. I don't believe we've got any other public testimony signed up at this time. Oh, Mr. Riemann jumped in. You weren't on my list, Mr. Riemann. Did you sign up late?
Mr. Chairman, perhaps I assumed that I was on because I was asked to testify for this subject. So I apologize if I didn't put in a notice for that, but I do appreciate time if I could.
Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, I'll be as brief as I possibly can be here. I wanted to start quickly with some background fiscal data to give some context about what local governments are facing. I'm really indebted to the Craig Group for including a local government fiscal profile in the May Craig report this year. That was something that had not been done before, and it certainly helped us to understand what the issues might be moving forward. That report for the fiscal years 20 through 24, taking the midpoint of their analysis, suggested that sales and use tax reductions for that period would be down $326 million for local governments alone. I tried to pull some assessed valuation comparison data. And just looking at 2019 versus 2020 assessed values, the change was roughly $322 million in reductions. Now, if you compare that and break it down by component part, mineral assessed valuation dropped over $715 million during that period. We're buoyed a bit by residential and other industrial and agricultural assessed valuations to again get to that $322 million reduction. Mr. Chairman, I wanted to just quickly talk about our priorities as it relates to this piece of legislation. The first has been talked about at great length here, and that's transparency. We're very committed to transparency, and as has been pointed out, without a requirement to do so, counties across the state have been posting online copies of their agenda, copies of their minutes, copies of their salary data. We are committed to continuing that. There is no additional cost for us to do that. As well, this bill does nothing to eliminate any requirement that we would have to provide this information in hard copy form if an individual requested it, or in electronic form if they sent a simple email to the county clerk's office. So we don't see this as a reduction in transparency. And I do have a couple of recommendations to the bill that will help to ensure greater transparency even with the press. Mr. Chairman, the second priority for us is about fair treatment. If you look at the requirements of local governments in comparison to our peer, whether that be special districts, schools, the state itself, we are treated differently as it relates to publishing minutes, as it relates to publishing salary data. We are the only entities, along with the municipalities, that are required to publish that data. And Representative Duncan asked about that public worker on the street. Our contention isn't that that public worker's name and information shouldn't be available if requested. The question is, should we have to pay for it to be published in the newspaper? So we can still find out who that individual is and provide fair treatment by passing this bill and maybe even making a couple amendments. The third priority for us is about reducing and or maximizing fiscal returns. There's been some conversation here about the data. Senator Scott, I have attempted to collect that data as best I can. At this point in time, I have 16 of the counties that have responded to me. And I'll just give you a little bit of a flavor for what it looks like. And now this data is specific to salary publication and to minutes. It's not the entirety of the responsibility that counties have to publish other legal notices and other information. If you just look at the salary requirement piece of this, the average of those 16 counties is just under $900 per publication. The high being Sweetwater County, which spends about $2,900, and Carbon County, which spends about $100. So quite a disparity. Again, that data is specific to salary publication. If you look at the meeting minutes, of which counties are responsible for publishing at least twice a month, the meeting minutes. In some cases, counties have more than 2 meetings, so it would be more. But the average is roughly $17,300, with Campbell County at the high end at about $34,300, and Lincoln County, based on the data that was given to me, at $1,100. So if you put those two pieces together and you kind of take the averages out to all 23 counties, it's about a $400,000 plus reduction in expenses across the state. Now, I did have some counties say, hey, it's not just about the cost that it takes to publish this data, it's also the cost that it takes for us to prepare this information in the format and the precise ways that the publishers need this information. That costs us staff time. It can take a day or more at a time to put that together for them. When those counties were saying we would just be able to simply prepare a PDF and post that online, it would be much more simple for us. I also wanted to just provide one other quick little note. So you might say $17,300 is rather insignificant. If you take Niobrara County as an example, they, for the first time last year, were able to offer health insurance for their employees. The cost of their publications for meeting minutes alone would pay for 3 staff members of that county to have health insurance for the entire year. So it can become significant depending on how you look at these things. Mr. Chairman, I'll just close with some requests that we might have for changes in the bill. And this goes, the first 2 go to what Representative Duncan were talking about early on. And that's on page 4, line 15. The current bill draft would have us delete the requirement to furnish a copy of the proceedings with the paper. If we can take away the requirement to actually pay to have it published, we're perfectly fine to furnish a copy to the press and would have no problem with that language remaining. In fact, we'd have no problem if you wanted to insert something similar into the provisions on page 5 relative to salary data. The only other thing, and that goes to that issue of fairness, would be that we would love to see on page 5, line 13, the deletion of the language, the name, from the publication requirements or even the posting requirements. Again, that doesn't alleviate our responsibility to provide that if requested. It simply removes the responsibility to publish it in the newspaper. I equate it to the fact that if one of my county employees goes into the grocery store, he amongst his municipality peers are the only individuals in there that work for government, whether that's the state, the federal government, a school district, a special district, they're the only ones that have their name published in the paper. With that, Mr. Chairman, I'd stand for any questions.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Reeman. Any questions for Mr. Reeman and the County Commissioners Association? Senator Scott, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, just on the figures, and this is very useful because these are the first real summary figures we've gotten. You're talking, if I understood you right, we're talking 400,000 a year in savings for the counties roughly. If we pass this bill as it stands right now, there's more cities than there are counties. So the cities are going to be 2 or 3 times what the counties are. That would give you a range of savings here of between 1.2 million and 1.6 million total. And that's per year, is it not? Not per biennium. Is that a reasonable figure as to what we're going to save in total for the cities and counties?
Mr. Reeman, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Scott, I think you're absolutely on the right track. From my perspective, I believe the municipalities are going to be the bigger fish in terms of the overall costs here. Certainly, we're a part of that. There are only 23 of us. There are 99 of them. So those costs, I think you're right in trying to use that sort of a calculation to get to that 1.2 to 1.6 figure.
Follow up. Okay. Yep, Mr. Co-Chairman, go ahead.
Mr. Co-Chairman, thank you. I guess it's really difficult to land on a very solid spot with this, but that feels a little bit high to me, Senator Scott. I guess, when we're talking $3,000 as an average, I think that's what Mr. Reeman indicated to us throughout the counties. Even if you if you boost that amount pure for the municipalities, it just feels like, I don't think we're gonna get up to 1.2 million. I guess I could use a little bit more explanation there, Senator. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, go ahead, Senator Scott.
Mr. Chairman, he was projecting on the minutes and the ordinances provision, 17,300 per year, I think is an average, or not per year, but per meeting. And given that, and given the figures for the salary, I thought his estimate for 23 counties in the vicinity of 400,000 a year was about right. And the cities are clearly, because there's more than 4 times the number, but they're, some of them are smaller, a lot smaller. I think we're starting to get in the ballpark of where we are. We'll have to pass the bill, we'll have to have a better estimate. But we're starting to hone in on this, and it isn't going to solve all the problems. But if we reject every time we can save $1 million or $1.5 million, pretty quick you don't have any savings, and you got a bigger tax increase we got to have.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman. I appreciate that.
Representative Clem.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to make the committee members aware. We did receive some information from a gal named Valerie Ketchery from the Gillette News Record, who I forwarded it on. You may have already seen it, but it should be in your inbox, and it does give a good indication of what both the municipalities and the counties pay as far as publication fees. And so I just ran across that again and just wanted to bring that to your attention so you have that data.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. And to piggyback on Representative Clem's statement, I just received from my local superintendent. They spend approximately, and I know this doesn't address schools, but they spend approximately, he said, $15,000 a year on publications.
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah, go ahead, Senator Case.
there is an amendment for the bill that's been prepared to include schools.
Okay, any other questions for Mr. Reeman? We kind of got side settled there and went around to Mr. Reeman. My apologies on that. I'm not seeing any other questions for Mr. Reeman. I'm going to go ahead and close public testimony. Committee, what's your pleasure?
Move the bill.
Moved by Representative Duncan, second by Representative Clem. Amendments Committee. I got Mr. Co-Chairman, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Just a brief bit of conversation before we get into the amendments of the bill. I guess I was interested as we came up toward the meeting the last few days as to what the sentiment was on the committee regarding the publishing of names and positions and base annual salaries. I've always kind of had a little bit of a head scratch there. I've never quite understood where that came from. I'd be inclined to support not requiring that anymore, but maybe a little bit of discussion if somebody feels adamant that we need to continue to do that. I always felt, honestly, Mr. Chairman, I felt badly for those who did not make a lot of money doing what they do. It just has always been a little bit uncomfortable when those sorts of things are published. And I think it's more difficult in the smaller communities out there. So anyway, just some thoughts before we get into amending the bill. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, I've got Senator Case next. Go ahead, Senator.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. And to my good chairman on the Senate side, that's a really good point. But I guess I think it comes down to people have a right to know about their government. And you have a right to know what your government is paying someone. And I think really where it's happened, hasn't been a big deal. And I think we fear that it happening, but I really think the names and the salaries should be right in there together. And Look at it, know what's going on, go on with your day. It'll not be a big deal when it's all done.
Further, does anyone have an amendment they would like to move? Representative Duncan, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I may not have caught everything, but before I give you pages and line numbers, basically I'm asking the municipalities, the government to provide the information to the paper, but I'm not asking them to publish it. That's the premise of my amendment. And I hope I got all the pages, but it starts on page 2. Reinsert lines 15 through 18. I did this quickly, so I'm hoping this reads correctly.
We'll find out from Melissa.
Which continues over onto page 4, line 16, and reinsert. Now, the question I have is line 6 on subsection F.
Of what page?
Of line 4. I'm not
You mean
sure.
page 4?
Yes, sorry, page 4. I'm not sure if we need to put that part in. And if we do, I think I need to remove the word publish on line 6 and change it to provide.
I believe my understanding on it is I believe your reinsertion down on line 16 would cover the intent of your amendment.
Okay,
That's
perfect.
my understanding. Either an attorney.
That's my motion.
Okay. Is there a second on the motion?
I'll second.
Second by Representative Clem. Any questions on the proposed amendment? I'm going to go to Mr. Hewitt really quick. Mr. Hewitt, does that cover the baseline of what Representative Duncan was attempting to do?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I believe an "and" should be inserted between furnish the newspaper with a copy of proceedings and post and maintain on the county's official website a comprehensive summary of the proceedings.
Perfect.
Bringer and the second are okay with that?
Yes.
Okay, Bringer and second are okay with that. Any discussion in regards to the amendment? Representative Blackburn, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So we're allowing the governments to give the newspaper that information to publish. And I'm wondering how that gets paid for and why, if it doesn't get paid for, why would the newspaper publish it?
Mr. Chairman.
Representative.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The way I understand this amendment is it's not requiring any publication at all. It's just, what it does is it requires the municipality or the entity to provide that information to a newspaper, at which point the newspaper can do whatever it wants with it. It can publish it if it wants to. It can sit on it. It can go ahead and investigate. All it's saying is that, hey, you have to give this information to a newspaper. What the newspaper does with it is their own business.
Got it. Thank you, Representative Clem.
Follow up, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, go ahead, Representative Duncan.
Thank you. This is my way of trying to have a compromise so that there's continued transparency for the public and without a cost to the municipality or the government. So it's a win-win, I'm hoping, is where I'm coming from with it.
Further comments? Senator Nethercott, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think that's a really interesting concept, and kind of going back to what testimony we heard from before on the topic from some members of the Press Association that the newspapers would create an online website for the submission of that. You know, my internal thoughts were, well, you're a little late to the party. As we know, outside entities have been very visionary, I guess, for mining government data and then publishing it on their own websites for their own profit, both as data miners and also as selling advertising on those private sites. And not all that money is just getting funneled out of state. And they're not required to be paid legal notices for them. They just get the data and then use it to their advantage. So this is a very unique question. And as we look at that, that's really consistent with how the data is used.
Further comments or questions in regards to the proposed amendment by Representative Duncan? Seeing none, all those in favor of the proposed amendment, please raise your hand in front of the microphone or in front of the camera. Okay, all those opposed, raise your hand.
I don't know if my mic's on. Help me out there, would you? My video's off.
The amendment is adopted. All right, committee, we're back on the bill. Is there any other proposed amendments?
Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, go ahead, Senator Case.
Mr. Chairman, if there's nothing else, I have one that would place school districts into the bill. And I have sent it out to all the committee members. Mr. Hewitt drafted the amendment, and I just might note that the amendment is the language within the bill and brings in appropriate state statutes, but the bill would actually have to be conformed a little bit more into the title. And Mr. Hewitt is, I see him nodding, but that's with it. If we were trying to put this amendment in during the session, we wouldn't be able to do that. But as part of our interim rules, we can make an amendment like this, which adds a whole new level. But we have a lot of local government that's involved in the school districts. They have the exact same issues. This amendment tries to do it. It was brought to me by a business manager of a school district, one of the school districts in my Senate district.
Gotcha. And that's a motion?
Yes, sir. I would make the motion with the proper conforming of the title.
Okay.
Second,
I think I had Representative Clem first. Mr. Hewitt, do you understand the intent of the motion and can you work with that?
I do, Mr. Chairman.
He wrote it.
Okay. So I guess my question before we go to voting on this is, I think if we're going to go down this road, I think this is appropriate to look at all levels of government. And this isn't necessarily related to schools, but are there requirements for special districts to publish?
Mr. Chairman, if that's directed to me, yes, indeed, there probably are within the special district statutes various places where their publishing requirements are noted.
This could become a big bill, I guess would be my point, because you can guarantee the special districts are probably going to come forward.
Well, Mr. Chairman, a few years ago, we had an entire manual of all the publishing requirements throughout state government. It was a really, really big binder, and I still have it. So there are publishing requirements by the university. There are lots and lots of publishing requirements. The only way to really effectively change those would be to go to each statute and make the change, as opposed to something like a notwithstanding, which creates really messy law. The problem with other special districts and stuff is they would not be able to avail themselves of this session. They could put in another bill that mimics it. But once it leaves the committee, you won't be able to make an amendment. Say this amendment passes, it'll say cities, towns, and counties and school districts online postings. That's what it's going to be. So I don't see any way to add more things in here without specific language at this time.
Gotcha. All right. Committee, any questions in regards to adding school districts to this piece of legislation? Senator Scott, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, and it may not be specific to school districts, but the way the title reads right now, it's an act relating cities, towns, and counties. If it read, it's an act relating to
government publications.
Governmental publications and online postings, and then talked about the various entities involved. That would that broaden the title enough so we could add something to it during session?
Mr. Chairman, I think that would be worth doing. I think this good senator has a good suggestion.
Bringer and the amendment's okay with that as a second?
Yeah, I would make that friendly. And Mr. Hewitt, if you understand that in the bill title conforming language, we leave it a big enough hunting license, we can put other things in there. Maybe not just local government. I'm not sure whether we need to restrict it to that, but that would be my motion.
Mr. Hewitt, do you understand the intent of the bringer of the motion?
Mr. Chairman, I do my recommendation for, as broad a title as possible would be something like an act relating to governmental publication requirements, amending publication and online posting requirements for governmental entities, and providing an effective date.
Yeah. Bringer, the motion, the second are okay with that?
Yes, sir.
As part of the motion, Senator Nethercock, go ahead.
Mr. Hewitt is brilliant. He is aware that the Public Records Act changed the definition for all public entities and put them under the umbrella of the definition of government entity. So he corrected that motion to address that particular umbrella language, which would hit all of the public entities that receive public funds.
And Senator Nethercott is brilliant.
Got a big kumbaya going on in here. Any other comments or questions about the proposed amendment? Question being called on the amendment. All those in favor, please raise your hand in front of your camera.
Okay, my hand's up. Go look at the big screen.
Am I up there?
All those opposed, please raise your hand. Okay, motion is adopted. Any other proposed amendments or discussion from the committee?
Question.
I guess I would be remiss if I didn't say this, because this will affect, I don't know that any other district besides maybe Representative Jerry Paxton's district would be affected more than my district by this piece of legislation, both in a good way and a bad way. I represent 5 little incorporated municipalities and a bunch of them that are not incorporated. And so 2 school districts and 2 different counties. And so definitely affected in a big way. And in that same vein, all these little towns, we heard Upton, it effectively accounts for Upton 1% of their budget. So that's a pretty big chunk. But then when I think about that, I think about the Weston County Gazette, little Upton town paper. Upton's got its own little paper. I can guarantee you that affects more than 1% of their budget. And so for me, when I think about this, it's a tough deal because we're mandating this interaction between government and private industry. And at the same time, I do have to lean towards transparency and lean towards transparency even in little towns. So I'm going to be a hard no on this piece of legislation. Representative Ayer, I think you wanted to say something. Go ahead.
Yes, I do. I realize that we need to look for cost savings where we can find them. But I think it's going to decrease transparency. I mean, if you got the local paper sitting on your table, you're going to look at it. I'm never going to click on the city's website or the school district website and look at what their financial data is and their minutes. Even if it's online, you open that paper every day and you look at it, but you're never going to go to the local entity's website to find it. So I think just whether it's intentional or not, and I realize that the intention is to make things more just as transparent, and they are for someone who's really trying to look for it. But for the average Joe citizen, it's going to be less available than it is currently.
Right. I think I had Co-Chairman Landon next.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. And I thought you spoke very well, and so did the representative from Uinta, and kind of covered a couple of the points I was going to make. This is a tough one. This is a real balance point, and for me, I'm just not sure I'm there yet. I've heard from several small towns out across that a lot of people know that I grew up over in the Pinedale area, and also spent a lot of time in the little town of DuBois, and I've talked to some of those small papers. Those are the ones that I really get concerned about. It's a tough thing. I keep going back to all the work we did, committee, for the last 2 years on trying to put some sunshine on all of our information. That was a really heavy lift to get legislation passed that established a lot more transparency with regard to our government. And this one kind of feels like it would be a step back. For me, I just don't think we're quite there. I kind of like having that information available. So I'll be a no on this one. Thank you.
I'm going to go to, I think I had Representative Clem next, and then I'm going to go to Senator Schuler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So a couple things. We've had a lot of activity in my community of Gillette, a lot of uproar with our local city council and actions that are taken there. And interestingly enough, where I have gone to and where others have gone to find actually the public postings of meetings and minutes and all of that has not been the newspaper, but it has actually been the city's website, which they've been they've done a very fine job at getting that information out there to the public. In fact, I have a harder time navigating our own newspaper. I don't know where I'm going on the newspaper to find that information. It seems like I have information overload. It's very accessible on the city's website to find that information. So I think it is somewhat of a preference to for people to do that. So that's number one. Number two, certainly we're looking at cost savings. I like the aspect of this bill because I think it provides a certain amount of local control to our local elected officials. They, not to speak on behalf of them, but we've heard time and time again when we make decisions on behalf of them, and in this case, the current law mandates that we are mandating these local municipalities and counties and whatnot. We are mandating that they spend money. Perhaps they feel that could be spent in a better way. And perhaps even if this bill were to move forward, you may have some municipalities who say, you know what, we want to go ahead and publish this information in our newspaper anyway. And they but that leaves that as a local choice. And then you have your local elected officials on the hook for those choices, and the public can speak out with that. So I have a harder time with the law as it is, because it almost feels as if that we are inserting ourselves between local government and constituents, and I think it shouldn't be that way. And finally, the last thing here is obviously when we think about cost savings, you know, we're going to have a big, hard, long discussion about how are we spending money and do we have enough revenues to cover our costs? And I think you're going to have that conversation on both sides. And I think if you allow for municipalities and counties and special districts, any of these government entities, whatever might end up in the bill if it goes forward, you allow them the flexibility then to decide on their own future and free up funds so that they don't necessarily have to raise taxes on their constituency. And it might be at the end, they still need to raise taxes, but at least you're allowing them to make wise and prudent decisions that they see in their eyes. I think that's important, again, for the local control aspect of it. So for our current law to mandate and say, you shall spend these dollars to support the media industry. And I think that's another thing that just really makes me uncomfortable, because it feels like we are supporting private industry, that this is a subsidy for media. And we've seen already or heard in testimony how there are several other media outlets who get this information willingly themselves and then profit from that information. So I do not think that we need to give our local media a handout off of the taxpayers, just bottom line. And so I like where this bill is going and would encourage an aye vote.
Senator Schuler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm just going to put my former city council hat on for just a minute and kind of mention, something I think that's important about this bill. When I was on the council for 8 years, we had folks that would get excited about something that's happening in our city only because they saw something in the newspaper. It was usually a liquor license transfer, but sometimes it was an ordinance or budgets, or maybe they read something in the minutes that got them fired up. That's the public's right to know, and that's where they went to get their information. They didn't go to the internet. I know when we first got our website up on our city site, we weren't getting the hits there that I think we get from people that I heard in town about information that they were interested in. It was the local paper. And yes, we have it twice weekly in our county, but that's where the folks get fired up about anything, is what they read in the paper. It's not that, I actually do both online and with the print, but I think the majority of our folks still are finding their information best from the printed newspaper. And lastly, I think as a council member, if we were looking at budget cuts, there's an awful lot of places we could cut in our budgets versus the small percentage that we would have to take a look at with newspapers and the ability to print or not print. And so for me, I'm a hard no also on this. Thank you, Chairman.
Senator Scott, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, this is a tough vote because clearly we passed this bill. We're going to reduce the flow of information that actually the public gets its hands on. And we are going to make it harder for our local newspapers who are very important to our communities. We're going to make it harder for them to survive. And that applies, I think, to the larger communities such as mine, as well as the smaller communities. On the other hand, we're spending more than our revenue justifies by quite a bit. And we're either going to have to cut expenses or we're going to have to raise taxes. And this has to do with how much are we going to have to raise taxes if we aren't willing to cut expenses. And it's all, every time we try to cut, you're cutting out somebody's income and they're going to object. So we're going to have a series of these hard votes. So we better get used to it. Mr. Chairman, I think the thing to do is to send this forward to the legislature so we have this potential cost-cutting measure in front of us. It'll be an option we can exercise or not exercise when we meet, but I think we need the vehicle. So I'm an aye vote on this.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman.
Yep, go ahead, Representative Duncan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a different perspective on this because I actually, in my personal life, in my business, I actually advertise with the local newspaper, even though print is passé in my business. 90% of my business is done online, and that's where most people find me. But there is that sense of traditional media and advertising. So I do pay for my local paper. So I am one of those people who also gets a subscription and I pay for advertising. So I'm probably paying what the city of Lingle is saying that they pay just for my own business. Now, having said that, every subscription that someone purchases, the paper is including in some of those, from what I'm understanding, a digital subscription. So they have access. The other part I want to make sure people understand is this is giving the municipality the leg to be able to negotiate versus being told what to pay. So they can go back to the newspaper. The municipality is now playing on a equal footing and they can actually negotiate their fees with the newspaper, just like I do as a business person and all over of Main Street. So we're all going to be on equal playing field. The other part is we got to remember, we're including school districts into this. That $15,000 for Goshen County, that's a job. We're saving one job by $15,000. So that's also can also equate to jobs at a municipality level too, rather than having to cut a person or a staff. By cutting your publication, you maybe be able to save a job. So these are really hard. I, deal with these people on a daily basis. I have letters on my desk and I have people who have come in to talk to me about this. But again, if you don't want your taxes raised, we have to figure something out. And these are the hard decisions. So I'm a yes. I'm reluctant, but it's time for government to do business do our job at the speed of business rather than the speed of government. So let's get into the 21st century and move forward.
Okay, Senator Nethercott, I think you had your hand raised. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I mean, this vote is difficult for any of us, particularly as it relates to newspapers, which we're all very sensitive to, and I know we all carry subscriptions for. But I do think in acknowledging Senator Schuler's concerns about her community and city council's role and what her constituents experience there, it's still optional. And so I think that those local governments that do rely heavily on the local newspaper as the primary source of information can still choose to budget that way and maintain those relationships with their constituents and their community members. But it's not this, forgive me, legislative colleagues, it's not this unfunded mandate, and right now it is. We are requiring them to publish with a specific business entity. I mean, there's not even a request for qualifications and any kind of competitive bidding. And I know our newspapers are strapped as it is. But how much of that is the government's fault, the state's fault, the legislator's fault for perhaps, arguably, I'm going to get some heat for this, an aging industry that's not pivoting with the needs of business and the needs of consumers. Side note, 1999 state DECA champion, where my project was online newspapers. I beat Gillette, and that was a very, very long time ago. And they should have listened to me. And perhaps now we'll force that newspaper industry to change the way it does business and still be competitive, right? Perhaps they can provide an online format as well on their online media and their online newspaper for a cheaper version. Why should that happen? Because they're not printing it. It's not going through the publication. There's no carriers, right? All of that overhead and all of those things that they employ, which are becoming a thing of the past, perhaps they can pivot and provide a service in a different way. And it looks different, and it's better for business and it's better for government.
Hey,
Mr. Chairman.
Yep, Representative Clem,
Thank
and then
you.
we're going to go ahead and wrap her up, folks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I just wanted to make one comment there and just so there's no misunderstanding. We're not, there's a discussion that we're going to make things less transparent, and I don't believe that's the case. We are directing that these governmental entities publish this information. So it's not as if we're taking away the mandate to publish. They still have to publish. We're just shifting, we're making a shift saying that the governmental entity itself can be the one who publishes this information. I never thought of that. Representative Duncan brought that up, but as far as giving these governmental entities a platform or a position in which to negotiate, I thought was really novel, and I didn't think of that before. And I think that's even another reason to vote for the bill.
All right. Seeing no further discussion on the bill, this vote will be for final sponsorship, so it'll be a roll call vote on the bill. Mr. Hewitt, please call the roll.
Senator Case.
Aye.
Senator Nethercutt.
Aye.
Senator Schuler.
No.
Senator Scott.
Aye.
Representative Blackburn.
No.
Representative Clausen.
No.
Representative Clem.
Aye.
Representative Clifford.
Aye.
Representative Duncan.
Aye.
Representative Ayer.
No.
Representative Furphy.
Aye.
Co-Chairman Landon.
No.
Chairman Lindholm.
No.
Interesting.
I've got a question about procedure here, if I could, Mr. Hewitt. Typically, our committee is 14 members. And unfortunately, due to the passing of Representative Edwards, we can't make that 14. Does it matter based on members elected during joint interim, or does it matter based on members present? And I believe it's members present.
Mr. Chairman, I believe it is. I think you have to have a quorum to do the meeting, but afterwards, it's the members present.
Right. You agree, Mr. Hewitt?
Mr. Chairman, I do, and for the record, that was a 7 votes for and 6 votes against vote, so it is adopted.
Right. All right, so that piece of legislation passes and will be sponsored by the Joint Corporations Interim Committee. For those of you that will be returning to the next legislative session, you've got some weight to carry on that one to get other members of the committee on board. So that'll be a little bit of a lift, but just the same, I fully expect to be able to do that. We're going to go on now to improvement in service districts, and that will be 21 LSO 0090. And members, if you need to take a break or use a restroom or anything like that, please don't hesitate to do so. We're going to keep whipping forward. We're only about 30 minutes behind, but I would like to make lunch at the right time. We do have quite a bit of testimony lined up on this next one. And Mr. Hewitt, are you presenting this piece of legislation?
I am, Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead, Mr. Hewitt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this is 21 LSO 90, Oregon Draft 0.4. It's the improvement in service district limitations legislation that the committee looked at in September. And the things moving here, I will note the amendments that the committee made in September. And just as a brief refresher, you'll recall that this legislation limits the taxes and fees improvement in service districts can charge to the limit stated in the district's original petition for formation, subject to voters being able to change that in elections down the line. So the two amendments the committee made, first one goes to who has standing to bring a challenge to a violation of that limit. And you'll see on page 3, lines 13 through 19, language, this is new language. It provides that any district taxpayer or payer of any district fee, charge, or other assessment may bring suit to enjoin a violation of subsection A of that section. That's the limitation on fees and assessments and other taxes that districts can levy, provided that the suit is filed within 120 days of the taxpayer or payer's receipt of actual or constructive notice of the district's action in violation of subsection A. And then the second amendment the committee made was to expressly provide that rules and regulations of the district should not be contrary to a district's given authority. And so on page 4, starting on line 12, you'll see 1812.114, and that section provides under current law that boards can adopt and shall adopt rules and regulations and procedures, including those to govern use and enjoyment of public improvements, facilities, and services of the district. The new sentence just expressly states that rules, regulations of the district shall not be contrary to the district's petition for formation or grant of authority to the district, including authority granted through the process established in 812.141. And on page 5, you can see 812.141, which allows districts to expand the services that they provide. Mr. Chairman, just a brief commentary. I will note that in reviewing public comments regarding this bill draft, it may make sense, of course it's the committee's determination, but the reference to the limitation is based on the petition for formation. The committee could change that to the grant of authority that the county gives, officially enacting the district into law. Same with the reference to the petition for formation in 812.114 on page 4. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, any questions for LSO in regards to the provided draft? Senator Scott, go ahead.
Chairman, for the LSO, if you have one of these things that's doing a certain function and the costs of that function gradually creep up with time, does this inhibit the ability of any district to increase fees to keep up with those increasing costs? Or is this really aimed at, they try to do something different and that has a major fee increase attached with it? I think there's an important distinction.
Mr. Hewitt.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Scott, if I understand the question right, the limitation is set at a dollar amount. And that dollar amount, I believe is fixed. Of course, it can be changed by voters subsequently to provide additional funding for additional services. But I don't think that there's any sort of built-in stair-step effect to increase the amount of revenue available to improvement in service district under this. Did that answer the question?
Follow up, Senator Scott, go ahead.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, yes, no. If these districts are created to do one thing at a limited time, for instance, to install curbs and gutters on the streets in some area, and it's a one-time thing, then the inflation concern doesn't bother me as much. If they're intended to provide ongoing services, then there will be inflation problems, and a dollar limitation is going to cause trouble. So that's the nature of my concern here, is what are we really aiming at here?
Mr.
Chairman, Senator Scott, I noticed that I'd note that the limitation is based on the district's original petition for formation. And that limitation is calculated as a dollar amount. And so if a district goes to add services, petition for formation still would be that limiting factor, and it would be up to the voters to allow the district to collect more fees and assessments and such.
Okay, any other questions for LSO? Seeing none, we're going to go to public testimony at this time, and we have quite a bit set up. And I know that there was some issues. I was messaged by Representative Jim Roscoe in regards to a lack of or internet service being down in their area, but I do see them in. I see Representative Roscoe now, so he should be joining shortly. While I'm letting these people in, Mr. Winnie, I notice you're here and you probably have some interest in this legislation. Did you want to testify?
Mr. Chairman, not unless something else comes up in other testimony.
Okay.
I'm comfortable with the bill as it's written.
Okay. Mr. Winnie's going to hold his powder for now. Representative Roscoe, thank you for joining us, sir. I hope you can hear us. Representative, can you hear us? Representative Roscoe, can you hear us? Maybe not so much. Oh, you're muted, Representative. Nope, still muted. Should be at the lower left-hand corner of the application. There's a little microphone button you can click. This is why you should.
Thank you.
Oh,
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee. This is Jim Roscoe representing House District 22. And House District 22 includes a district that's involved in this bill in Sublette County, and is the Hoback Ranch Improvement District that was devastated by the Roosevelt fire a couple years ago. My concern about this bill is mainly that it would seriously restrict the service district's ability to adjust to provide for the services improvement that they need. So LSO 90 would require, so this is the key, I think, is it would require a majority of all the members in the district, not the way it is now, which require the majority of the members that vote. And it would actually, it could affect this district that they couldn't really get anything passed. This Hoback Service District has never had a majority of its 265 members to vote on one issue. They've had 33%, and I think historically the highest percentage they've ever had of voting participation has been 43%. Correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like that this improvement in service district should make decisions with the majority of the people that actually vote, that actually cast votes. And I think that's sort of the main issue of this whole bill. There are plenty of notices to all the members of the committee that a vote is coming up. The entire process is open and transparent. It's kind of similar to the way it should be the way that we've all been elected just recently ourselves. I guess my second concern is that the committee should consider is how this bill would negatively affect other service and improvement districts around the state. I'm not sure that, I mean, I would rather that we didn't, that you didn't continue on with this bill. And thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will stand for questions. I do know there's some public comment from people from this Hoback Ranch District that would like to speak after me, and they will provide a lot more information than I was able to. Thank you.
Okay. Any questions for Representative Roscoe?
I don't have my camera on. Sorry.
Representative Ayer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Roscoe, thank you for your testimony and thanks for being here. I was wondering why it is that you have such low voter participation.
Representative Roscoe.
It seems like, to me, that people would be more interested in you could be able to get a far greater number of the members of the district to cast a vote if it was important to matter.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Representative Ayer. The way I understand it is that there's a lot of this property that is not, I think there's only 75 people that actually live there now. And some of these properties are held by trust and people that have really no immediate interest in the, let's just say, in the repair of the damages that were created by the fire, which were large erosion problems, road problems, and fencing problems. The fencing actually was taken care of by grants and stuff outside of the district, just by a lot of work by the people that live there. I think there's I think it's the director of the district will explain a little bit more about why there are so few people participating.
Okay. Any other questions for Representative Roscoe? Seeing none, Representative Roscoe, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Yeah, if we have something come up, we'll definitely look to come back to you. I'm going to go to Representative Stiff now at this point. Representative Stiff, welcome to the best committee in the legislature.
Mr. Chairman, it's an honor and a privilege to be here. Thank you so much. I speak in support of the bill, as you may know. I did have one comment with respect to the new language. I believe it's on the bottom of page 4 that speaks about the district acting contrary to its issuing rules or regulations contrary to the original petition to establish its formation. And my recommendation would be that to add the word, because the word contrary is subject to dispute about what it would mean in a given context. I think it would clarify it if before the word the grant of authority, if you were to add the words in excess of the grant of authority. That would, I think, capture the intent that you don't want a district issuing rules and regulations that are in excess of the authority granted by the original petition that established the district. So the words in excess of, I would add before the grant of authority. Having said that, I appreciate Representative Roscoe's comments. However, if there is a maximum cap for taxes, property taxes set in the original petition, then the people who buy that property are buying so in reliance upon that being an actual cap. And it should be at least a majority of the property owners to change that. So I think this bill strikes a fair balance between the potential needs of a district to increase its cap, but to say that it's onerous to require a majority vote of the property owners, to me, does not seem persuasive, because it should be somewhat difficult to bust through a maximum limit on taxing power. With that, I have no further comment. I'll stand for any questions you might have.
Okay. Any questions for Representative Stiff? Not seeing any. Thank you very much, Representative Stiff. Please stick around in case something, just like Representative Roscoe, in case something comes up. We have a fairly robust list of people that will be testifying. With that being the case, I don't recognize a lot of these names, so I'm going to go ahead and kind of give out the rules in regards to testifying. Mr. Co-Chairman, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to point out Representative Roscoe, I think, had one more brief comment before we get to public testimony.
Representative Roscoe, is it something that we might have missed, or is this a little bit more of a back and forth between Representative Stiff?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would just like to say that notification to all the members in the district is given out, and they have the opportunity to participate and are welcome to do so and encouraged to do so. So I don't think that but if they don't participate, it's going to really enable this district to do almost anything. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, thank you, Representative Roscoe. Okay, so as I was saying, when it comes down to testifying, please go through the chairman. Try to keep personalities out of things. We try to keep things kind of cordial. If you've heard somebody say exactly what you were going to say or something akin to what you're saying, I'm going to ask that you not repeat it just because we are running a little over time, and that's definitely not your fault. That's 100% my fault as being the chairman. I should have been whipping a little bit harder on myself, but I didn't. So my apologies. So we're going to go and we're going to start off with Mr. William Conley. And some of these names I may mispronounce, and I certainly apologize for that if I mispronounce your name. Mr. Conley, are you there? Mr. Conley. Thought I had everybody admitted I do. Okay. Oh, okay, that was written only, pardon me. My LSO staff's keeping me lined up. Next on the list will be Chris Lasanek, or Lacanek. I'm sure I mispronounced that. I apologize, sir.
Mr. Chairman, that's quite all right. Everybody has always mispronounced it. It's Lasanek for the record.
Lasanek, I would have never got that. I apologize. Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, well, thank you for making the time today. I appreciate it. Glad to be here. Yeah, so I had a few points I want to make. One is I'd like to start off by pointing out that there are certain districts under Title 18, Chapter 12 on improvement in service districts that do have mill limits. For instance, for ISDs established for the provision of emergency medical services, they have mill limits. And I'm sure for good reason the authors of this text chose to make it so that only certain districts have such a limit and that others do not. There are certainly several good reasons why it makes sense to forego such a limit. Senator Scott's points speak directly to this. However, not only does this bill aim to provide a mill limit, but it also aims to encompass special assessments and fees as part of it, encompassing those within this limit. Even in Title 18, Chapter 12, mill limits are not inclusive of all fees, special assessments, et cetera, as it stands currently. These are separate mechanisms. Not only that, but Title 18, Chapter 12, Clause 115 provides mechanisms for using special assessments for specific members of an ISD in which those people receive specific benefit above and beyond other members. So I want to be clear that this bill takes some critical tools out of the ISD toolbox that ensures sustainability and solvency for an ISD. In our ISD, and I am part of the Hoback Ranch's membership, I'm not on the board, I'm simply a member of the community, and I'm a taxpayer. We have seen multiple events in the past few years that serve as evidence of the need for these tools, and they have served the community well. Namely, as you know, we just went through the Roosevelt fire. Thankfully, because a lot of hard work and generosity, we were not subject to a special assessment to respond to the increasing demand brought on by this disaster yet, I should say. Thankfully, we did not need to use this tool, but if we would have needed to use it, this text as written would have hamstrung us against doing so. Clearly not a benefit to the community. I'll be quick to point out, another event where we were less fortunate was in our requirement to respond to a lawsuit brought on by a resident of our ISD, Bill Winnie, which was focused on many aspects related to this topic. I'll be quick to point out that the judge ruled in favor of the ISD on all aspects, but more relevant to my original point, fighting this lawsuit required our ISD to spend emergency funds. Despite the fact that the judge ruled 100% in our favor, the taxpayers of our community paid the price for Mr. Winnie's suit. This point demonstrates that there are unexpected and unplanned reasons that may call for the use of these financial tools as originally written. This point also confirms the concerns expressed by several of the senators and representatives of this committee during the meeting held back on September 10th. The concern expressed then was that the potential negative impact of one lone wolf in a community that chooses to exploit a low barrier for entry and causing extraordinary expense by an ISD through special elections and litigation is harmful. Our situation is exemplary of these concerns. In fact, if you played the logic out wherein ISDs were restricted on the revenue they could generate, while also being open to unlimited risk exposure from any individual in the community, a single person could cripple the financial well-being of a given ISD by making them continuously spend on lawsuits and special elections. This would clearly harm individual taxpayers and communities revolving around a given ISD. I also want to speak to the idea that the bill is purportedly to rein in ISDs that are out of control across the state. First, this premise was argued based on a sample size of one, Hoback Ranches, where I stand right now, and with many inaccuracies, ranging from the incorrect information on the mill equivalent history of our ISD to the overstepping of bounds of the ISD. Our mill equivalent has been below 10 for the past several years, is close to 8.5 in the most recent tax year, and has never come anywhere close to being as high as the county mill equivalent, as claimed on September 10th. Our ISD has worked cooperatively with the county and the community to serve members of the community. Comments made about the ISD trying to issue building permits is totally false. And so the underlying question here is, where is the evidence that this is a real issue that is in need of drafting this legislation? How many ISDs have been interviewed? How many people have the legislatures heard testimony from that have been wronged? How many examples has the sponsor of this legislation brought forward? How many people in the ISD that have been used as how many people in the ISD that have been used as the textbook example of an ISD gone out of control take issue with the ISD? This is a sample size of one, and the number of people that take issue with the ISD's budget and any mill levy equivalent. In closing, one final correction for the record that came up on September 10th, which is relevant. Our ISD, and I believe it is the requirement of every ISD, is to hold 2 public budget meetings every year in which the budget is provided to the public, presented publicly, commented on, and voted on. This takes place prior to the budget that is presented to the county. I personally have attended all of these and don't ever recall a single nay vote on our budget. Not to say that it hasn't happened, but I personally do not remember any, not even from the person that brought suit against the ISD. But the main point here is that this provides a process by which there are checks and balances in the budgeting process, which ultimately dictates the mill levy equivalent. If there were an ISD that were out of control, these public meetings and votes would serve as the built-in check against them. And those are all of my comments. Thank you very much.
Okay, before we go to questions, sir, I'm gonna welcome you to the Wyoming legislature. We tend to stay away from personalities, i.e. proper names, calling someone a lone wolf, those types of things. So for future reference and for the other people listening in, let's stay away from that. Members, any questions? Okay, seeing none, thank you very much for your testimony, sir. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
We're gonna go on now to Ms. Gloria Thomas. She said, I saw an in-person on that deal, but I'm not seeing Ms. Gloria Thomas. Okay, we'll come back if we need to. Mr. Sam Summerall. Sorry if I mispronounced her name.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I am Sam Summerall. I'm the current president of the board for Hoback Ranches Service Improvement District. My neighbor, Mr. Sinek, has laid out pretty much a broad perspective of this whole issue. I would like to address a couple of things against the background of the fact that as president of the board, I am representing the entire district, but I'm also a full-time year-round resident dealing with issues that many of our owners do not. That being snow removal, extreme winters, dealing with the effects of the fire that we recently had. And I'd simply like to address the same concern that Senator Scott did. There are many, many types of ISDs all across the state of Wyoming. Many serve one purpose. They exist for a short period of time and they're gone with their function having been fulfilled. Our district is totally different in that we have some 260 odd owners, which I guess would be classify them as qualified electors. Only about 75 of us are permanent residents. Many of these parcels within the district are, as Representative Roscoe pointed out, are held by trusts, absentee owners. They are raw land. There are no structures on them. They're held for investment purposes only. They were purchased for investment purposes only. And to go back and to address a question, I cannot remember who posed it. The reason for the low turnout of voters is simply that. There are many, many owners out here that don't have any skin in the game, in that they're not residents. If they are, they're here for a couple of weeks during the summer, early fall, and don't have the vested interest that the rest of us do in this particular community, in this particular district. I would simply say that in representing all of us, comments that Representative Roscoe pointed out are very clear. We work in very, very close relationship with the county commissioners. We publish by regulation every public meeting. We hold 2 budget meetings every year before our recommended budget goes to the county commissioners for approval. And then it comes back to us and we vote on it for final submission. My point would be, in closing, this bill simply sets too high a bar for setting or removing a cap. In that, with the low turnout for reasons I've already stated, to get a majority of qualified electors would absolutely be impossible. having said that, it sets up a platform for our improvement district, and in all likelihood, multiple districts across the state that are like us, that provide continuing, ongoing services to residents over many, many years. It would hamstring us in being able to provide suitable living conditions to get in and out of the neighborhood, to be able to get to work, to be able to function as viable tax-paying citizens of the state of Wyoming. I would hate to see this legislation passed as it stands, because it just doesn't make any sense, and it would hamstring us in being able to provide the necessary services. If we were, as Chris pointed out earlier, if we were introducing new services or running amok with charging, that would be one thing, but that's certainly not the case, as history would point out. And again, I'd like to reassert Chris's comment that, and our reason for being here this morning is I'm just not sure that adequate research has been done across the broad spectrum of ISDs in Wyoming, particularly with the variance of all the services that are being provided to justify the introduction or the continued time and effort it would take for this committee to pursue that. So with that, I'll close my comments, and thank you very much for the time.
Representative Clausen, go ahead.
Just a quick question for Mr. Summerall. At what point do you think, and maybe this is theoretical, you go from being or have the needs of an improvement service district to need to go to be an incorporated city or town, provide services of that sort? I think we're hitting a fine line here where maybe you get to be so many services without them being voted on that you could shift over and become incorporated. Has your board thought of that, or is that something that crosses your mind?
Mr. Summerall, go ahead.
As best I can answer that, I've been a resident of the district for some 5 years now. And again, I am relatively new on the board, but from the highway to the entrance of Hoback Ranches is some 3 miles of Forest Service road that is graveled. If you've ever had the pleasure of being in Bondurant late January or early February, you'll appreciate the difficulty that comes with removing the snow. We are struggling right now to be able to provide the services that we are charged with by the we being the board by the original formation document. There have been discussions. There has been interest on part of this board and previous boards to move beyond that. But obviously, that would be something that would be in the hands of people that are above my pay grade. I don't know that that answers your question at all, but that's about all I can provide.
Okay, Senator Scott, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, my question is in a service improvement district, this one in particular. How is the board selected? Is it elected in a general election, or is it appointed? How's it selected?
Go ahead, Mr. Summerall.
I'd be glad to answer that. We are, Senator Scott, we're elected just like you are. It's open. It's advertised by rules and statutes. We're required to put public notice out. We accept, the district accepts nominations. All who put in nominations are put in ballots, on the ballot, public notice. Those ballots are collected by rules, counted, and the results are made known. But again, that election takes place and the election stands on the basis of those who actually vote, as opposed to qualified electors. Ballots are sent to everybody in the district. And again, the voter turnout is very low because of reasons I stated earlier. Thank you for your question. I hope that answers it.
Any further questions for Mr. Sumrall? Seeing none. Thank you very much, sir. Appreciate your time.
Thank you, sir.
All right, we're gonna go back to Gloria Thomas now. Ms. Thomas, are you there? Ms. Thomas, I see her in the waiting room.
Try admitting her.
She's in there, or not in the waiting room. I'm sorry. She was in the waiting room. She's admitted. She's in here now, but not hearing anything. We're gonna go to Lucy Conley now. Lucy Conley, are you there?
Can you hear me now?
Yep, we got you now.
Thank you very much for allowing me to speak for just a moment. It will be just a moment because I've been a resident from the Hoback Ranches for 20 years. And I think Mr. Sumrall and Mr. Lesenic have been correct about just everything they've said. One thing that was omitted was that our directors, we have 3 directors, and they serve a 3-year term. And then, so every year we have a new director, which means we have a new voice as to how much the district can and should spend on our roads, 26 miles of roads, gravel roads. And the other point I think that needs to be mentioned is that Hoback Ranches was founded in '86, and it's 6,000 acres with in the covenants, a 10-acre minimum. And there is speculation on land in Hoback Ranches. So the idea of having 50% of voters or of residents approve, it just simply doesn't make any sense whatsoever to me. And I just want to make it very clear that in 20 years, the directors who are unpaid have done a fine job of communicating with everyone and making sure that Sublette County approves and agrees with everything that we do. I'll end my comments there. Thank you very much for letting me say something.
Thank you very much, ma'am. Any questions for Ms. Conley? I'm not seeing any. Thank you very much for your testimony, ma'am. We're gonna go on to Richard Thomas at this time. Mr. Thomas, are you there? Mr. Thomas. Okay, moving on. Molly Nemitz. Ms. Nemitz, are you there? Oh, you're muted, ma'am.
I am there. I am here.
I've got you written down as Molly. Is your name Mary? I'm sorry.
Molly is my nickname.
Oh, gotcha. Gotcha. Well, I'll call you Ms. Nemitz. Go ahead, ma'am.
Whatever's fine. Chairman Lindholm and Chairman Landon, I appreciate the opportunity to discuss this legislation with you. My husband and I live in Bondurant. We've owned property here for 40 years and have now retired here, so we're now permanent residents. When we lived in Cheyenne many years ago, I was on staff at the LSO, so I understand a little bit about how this process works. And one thing I would like to say is, although that was a long time ago, it's good to see that you, Senator Scott, are still in the fight, because it's been a long and illustrious career that you've had, and I was there in the beginning. when I worked for the LSO, I had the privilege of working for the late great Joe Meyer, and he taught me a lot about bill drafting. And what he mainly taught me was the importance about drafting across with clarity and drafting across the statutes with consistency. So what I hope to be able to persuade some of you today on is to honor this approach that he taught me and decline to move this bill forward on that basis. But before I talk about that, I would like to say that I want to stress that this discussion should not be about the HRSID, and it shouldn't be about what many have considered in the Hoback Ranches as misrepresentation of some of the facts. And it shouldn't even be about what we have heard as unfounded accusations of malfeasance by the HRSID. That was put to rest by the court in the recent lawsuit. And what this, and that lawsuit was decided 100% in favor of the HRSID. So what this should center on, though, is the clear and logical statutory scheme that the improvement and service districts across the state rely upon to form and then conduct their budget procedures. Before I go to that, like Mr. Lasinik, I want to point out that I hope you seriously consider the fact that there's been really no investigation into how this is going to impact other districts across the state. There has been no effort would be made to seek their input. And from my old experience, I know that interim study bills are designed to look at the big picture. And I feel like that is a real failing of this particular piece of legislation, as we have no idea how many other districts will be impacted. And if we cause some struggling districts to have some unanticipated problems, you know, that's not a good thing to do. And you know, the other part of that is that the people who are involved with helping manage the districts, the board of directors, they don't have lobbyists or legislative liaisons or attorneys to keep track of what's going on in the legislature. So without anyone seeking their input, this can come as a real surprise, and it should really be a point of you should be very skeptical about this legislation when it's had no has had no collaboration. So that being said, what I really want to focus on today is to be able to talk a little bit about the statutory procedure that's set forth in both the Improvement and Service District Act, which is Title 18, Chapter 12, and the Special District Election Act, which is Title 22, Chapter 29, and how they interact to form a service and improvement district. So first step, to commence the process, anyone, and experience shows that it's most likely a developer, but it could be anyone, wanting to form a service and improvement district must first circulate a petition which defines boundaries, suggests functions, and then obtains signatures representing 60% of the landowners. This petition is then presented to the county, and once those signatures and boundaries are verified, the county commission must hold a public hearing, and at that public hearing, the commissioners are given the discretion to either disapprove the petition, approve the petition, or modify the petition. And then they set forth this decision by resolution. If that formation is approved, the county presents the issue to the qualified voters of the district with a slate of directors. And if that question is approved by the voters, and again, I want to point out that it's a majority of those voting on the issue, then the district is established. So the bottom line is the petition for formation only commences the process. The county establishes the district by resolution, and the subsequent election serves to ratify and organize it. Any attempt to give legal authority to a request or a statement contained solely in the petition of formation, such as a mill levy cap or otherwise, would first of all, undermine the discretion vested in the county commissioners and the voters. And secondly, create confusion and disrupt the process, which was described by Judge Tyler in the recent court case as clear and unambiguous. So practically speaking, this bill can set up a potential conflict between the petition for formation and the county resolution, which would frankly require adjudication. And obviously that costs taxpayers money. And that is a primary concern for myself as a taxpayer and those who are trying to manage the district effectively and efficiently. So importantly, if the county resolution establishing the district specifies a mill levy limit or a cap, then, and that's presented to the voters, which they approve, then that limitation should be honored. This legislation could be appropriately amended to reflect that statutory scheme. Similarly, it would be the functions stated in the county resolution, not in the petition for formation, that would be the authorized functions. So, in conclusion, to my point, this legislation does not serve to protect taxpayers' interests, but will disrupt a clear, workable statutory scheme that will likely lead to confusion and increased litigation. I urge this committee to contemplate the ramification of increased litigation, such as the Hoback Ranches has recently experienced, to the detriment of all our resident taxpayers. We all agree that there is a right to redress unfair taxation. It's sacrosanct in our system, but meritless or vindictive legislation harms all taxpayers. A small political entity like the Service and Improvement District essentially self-funds legal costs. This comes at the sacrifice of services and improvements or increased taxation. I urge the committee to consider whether there are alternatives, such as requiring a certain % of taxpayers to formally protest a budget. Maybe there should be a mediation approach to tax or other legal challenges, such as an administrative hearing process. Perhaps the county attorney's office could support this. In conclusion, I hope you agree that this bill as written is too problematic for you to give it your support. Thank you for your time and consideration. And if there's any questions I could answer, I'd be happy to.
Thank you, Ms. Nemitz. Really appreciate your testimony. Any questions for Ms. Nemitz? I'm not seeing any. Thank you very much, ma'am. Appreciate your service to the state also.
Thank you.
All right, we're moving on. I'm going to go back to Gloria Thomas, see if you're there, Gloria. Trying to make sure. Yep, I think she unmuted.
I unmuted. I'm sorry I'm late. I had a little situation here at the house. I think most of my comments have been covered by the last couple of speakers. We've been living in Hoback Ranches for 16 years, and I've never seen the cost out of sight. We've never paid more than the county taxes us, as has been claimed. We do not issue building permits. We simply confirm with the county planning and zoning that the plans conform with our covenants. I think that everything else has been covered. Thank you.
Questions for Ms. Thomas? Not seeing any. Thank you very much, ma'am. We're going to go on next to Mr. Ryan. I believe he's should be here. Gary Ryan. Not hearing anything. We're moving on. Craig Haslam. Pretty sure I mispronounced that.
Fremont County boy there, Mr. Chairman.
Actually, Mr. Chairman, you're one of the few people who have ever pronounced it correctly. So thank you for that.
Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I'm Craig Haslam. I am the president of the Wyoming Special Districts Association. And I'm here today in opposition of the legislation and in support of the Hoback Improvement District. I don't think there's a lot that I really could add to what has already been said, other than that, you know, everybody is given a chance to vote in elections as we've just witnessed as a nation. And with that, with everybody having that opportunity, I believe that has been given everybody in the Hoback area has been given that opportunity. And if we go forward and we start to restrict some of these special districts, I mean, they were given special districts were formed in order to provide services that our county commissioners aren't able to or weren't able to. And when they come forward to limit the amount of money that improvement districts would be able to take in, I think would be very problematic. They come into a lot of different things. A lot of different things are happening. Special district or the improvement districts are everything from just a water, just a small water distribution type deal to the type of services that the Hoback improvement district provides for their constituents that are in there. If we start to restrict that and not allow them to be able to continue to provide those services for the people that live in that area, there's a great concern for all of us if we cannot do that by allowing them to vote on it, giving them that opportunity. And as I said earlier, everybody is given that opportunity in that area to vote. It's their choice whether they do or do not. And by not doing so, they are allowing the majority of those who do vote, we have to live under what they vote in for us. Again, like I say, there's been a lot of good testimony as to why this legislation is not good legislation, in my opinion, also. And again, I'll leave it with that. And if anybody has any questions, they're welcome. I would be happy to answer those.
Okay, any questions for Mr. Haslam? Oh, Senator Scott, go ahead, yeah. Senator Scott, you're muted again.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, it seems to me like every time we have a governmental entity, we need to have some ability for public restraint on what it does and how much it spends. The question I have for the proponents of this legislation, if we have any, is why the election process of electing the board isn't adequate restraint. And the question I have for Mr. Haslam is basically the same. Does the election process for these special districts provide adequate protection for the residents of the district in terms of what one of these districts does? Does that election process provide an adequate restraint in your judgment on what the districts can do?
Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Senator Scott, I believe that they do. I mean, that is what I'm going to get on a little bit of soapbox, I guess. That is what our nation is founded under. I mean, is for people to be able to go forward to vote and for their representation and the things that they want and need to sustain their life and liberty. And I think that is one of the bases of our nation, is to be able to do that. And by allowing people to that opportunity is what we're all about.
Okay. Seeing no further questions from Mr. Haslam, really appreciate the opportunity and thank you for your testimony, sir. We're going to go on next to Mr. David Nemitz. Not seeing David.
Yep, I'm here. Hang on. Thank you. Am I coming through?
Yes, sir.
Great. Co-Chairman Landon and Lindholm, as well as members of the committee, my name is Dave Nemitz, and I'm a resident of the Hoback Ranches Service and Improvement District. I'm very appreciative of the opportunity to present some factual information that hopefully will help this committee better appreciate the potential negative impact of this legislation 21 LSO 090. I would ask that you utilize your positions to assist both the taxpayers living in the ISDs and those who volunteer their time to serve fellow neighbors and taxpayers in ISDs, rather than impairing our ability to do so. As a former board member of the Hoback Ranches Service and Improvement District, I had the dubious distinction of signing checks that funded entirely by resident taxes in defense of what ultimately was determined to be a meritless court case. This lawsuit, brought by a single disgruntled landowner and his spouse, has cost the district more than an entire year's worth of our road budget. So I would ask that you reconsider this proposed legislation, which would only likely engender more legal expense because it creates some confusion and inconsistency with the existing law. First, in clarification, briefly, I know a lot of people have already commented on this, but the maligned HR Hoback Ranch Service and Improvement District is consistently operated in accordance with the number one function set forth in the 1986 Sublette County resolution that established it, and number two, the myriad of state statutes that regulate its electoral process and record keeping requirements and budgetary procedures. Significantly, the sponsor of this legislation has neglected to mention that this budget procedure for the Hoback Ranches, as well as other improvement and service district, is quite transparent and inclusive. As has previously been stated today, prior to submitting a proposed budget to the county, the district advertises in the local paper about a meeting, and then we have a public meeting specifically to present the budget to all residents and solicit their input. Then a separate subsequent meeting is held to approve the budget prior to submitting it to the county. If you were to check the minutes of all previous Hoback Ranch service and improvement meetings, you would find that no one has complained about any line items in the budget except for ballooning legal costs caused by the recent lawsuit that's been addressed. Nobody ever says, I want less road maintenance, that's for sure. Once this resident did send his lawyer to protest, and ultimately this same individual chose to sue the board rather than engage or with the board or try and run for office. So it can present problems. The thrust of this legislation in providing a cap to the ISD's budget to whatever the petition for formation might state, but the petition for formation is not the determinative document. The statutes say that it is the county by resolution that establishes the districts. Only language regarding the mill levy caps or district functions contained in that document would be relevant. Some improvements like road maintenance are not static, and there's aging infrastructure, there's weather, natural disasters, expanded use and changing circumstances all can serve to wreak havoc on both long-term and short-term expenses. The bill as it stands does allow for bonding, but that's a fairly complicated and unwieldy process for a few volunteer board members. The language of this bill would also serve to restrict the district's ability to function effectively and as designed. For example, the Service and Improvement District Act specifically allows for flexibility to create special assessments. Arbitrary adherence to a mill levy such as this legislation promotes would essentially negate the district's ability to set these special assessments or on taxpayers that might desire extra services or improvements. Likewise, the impact fee, which is something the ISD can legally choose to impose for new construction or for road damage incurred during new construction, this would be made impossible, hamstringing our board's ability to seek appropriate restitution for repair costs from those that create the damage only serves to unfairly transfer the cost to all the rest of the taxpayers. though I have no doubt that most residents of this district would support lifting a cap were it legislated, requiring the majority of all the qualified electors to do so would effectively negate any ability to provide a desired level of service to those in the district most affected. Since no more than 43%, which has already been the number thrown out, since no more than 43% of qualified electors in the Oback Ranches have ever voted in an election, a more appropriate wording might be the majority of those casting ballots. That way, absentee landowners are unable to dictate what local residents need and want by simply neglecting to vote. They must vote to have their voice heard. Lastly, I would like to ask that you carefully consider this bill's language allowing a single individual to further expend the district's limited fund in legal matters. It seems more appropriate to require a minimum percentage of residents to trip that trigger or require some mandatory arbitration before heading to court on tax or other legal disputes. Please remember that the special district does not have an attorney staff such as in the county offices or state. And so the legal costs all come directly out of the taxpayer's pocket. And believe me, will have significant impact on the district's budget. So hopefully this information facilitates your decision-making process. And I urge you not to move this legislation forward. As one who has spent thousands of hours of volunteer time trying to keep a district functioning over the past 3 years, I would be happy to provide any information or history that may be helpful. And I thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Nemitz. Any questions for Mr. Nemitz? Seeing none. Thank you very much for your testimony, sir. It's very much appreciated.
You're welcome.
Go back to Richard Thomas. I'm assuming Richard might be with Gloria. Richard, are you there?
Richard is not here.
Okay. All right, we're going to go on to our last testimony request, which is Mr. Dave Fellows. Mr. Fellows, are you available? Not seeing Mr. Fellows. All right. Any other public testimony? Mr. Winnie.
Sir Chairman, I'd like to make some comments on things you've heard because you heard a little bit of smoke and mirrors in here. They talk about the founding petition. The founding petition cannot be found. A search of the documents in Sublette County was done and could not be found. Thus, you go back to the letter that caused that to happen that was then submitted to the people of the district. And it in fact promised an 8 mil cap on taxes. And note that that cap does result, if it existed, would result in an increase in value or an increase in receipts as the property values went up. There was remark about, well, gee, all these other districts. At one point, I got on the phone and called some 46 of the districts around the state, and I asked specifically if any of them had such a promise or cap in their initial founding documents, and the answer was no. And so none of those districts would be affected by that part of this legislation. The district itself is limited to services. They said 46 miles of dirt roads, then the perimeter fence around the district, and no hunting. The remark was made at one point that, gee, they don't do building permits. Well, they did. They put it up on their website there for a while. It was personally related to me by one of the families whose house disappeared in the Roosevelt fire. that they were told that if they didn't stop making negative motions about this or that in the district, that their building permit might be delayed. So yeah, that was out there. Maybe it's gone away. I got it. Then I would also note that when this first came up in 2013, I attended that meeting. And what was really presented to this summer meeting, the purpose of which was just to approve their budget for the coming year, was they needed a special assessment. But they really didn't want to do a formal special assessment as provided by statute. They just needed a little bit of extra money. Well, this perked my ears up, and I remarked on it to that meeting and said, well, gee, why don't you put something in the minutes about this being a one-time deal? And the response perked my ears right up because they wouldn't answer my question. So I filed that away and said, okay, guys, let's see what you do in 2014. In 2014, sure enough, they came out with a budget that exceeded the 8 mil of the promise when the district was formed. And you should note that the district abided by that 8 mil cap right up to 2012. And I'll admit that that was probably hampering them at some point. And so my point to the board in 2014, when I first brought that up to them and said, gee, you can't do this, I said, put it to a vote. The fundamental issue of how our country runs is the voters get to decide how they be taxed. And I've been met with various responses on put it to a vote, like, well, we did. No, it was a summer meeting vote, or there is no limit, or whatever. And my basic point is that when the district was founded, there was a promise made. The district should abide by the promise, or they should put it to a vote of the district. The specific mechanics of how that might work is up to the committee, but that would be my point, put it to a vote. And somehow they have sidestepped that throughout this process. And my comment, there was a comment made about whether I had engaged the board. Well, I did. I went through a number of times talking to individual board members and other people associated with the board about the issue of the promise of 8 mils when it was founded. It would also be worthy of note that when the district was founded, the real estate developer that set it up in the late 70s, early 80s, gave them an initial $100,000 in the funding for the district. So they didn't start off just with tax money. And how they used that money and spent it was up to the board. And they were able to not go up to the 8 mils for many years. Now you can argue as to whether that was wise or not. But the point is, for a number of years, they were below 8 mils on their taxes up through somewhere around the year 2000, as I recall. Maybe wise, maybe not, as to how they did it. But the fundamental point is they have limited authority, roads, fences, no hunting. They were later granted authority to enforce private covenants that apply to all the lands within the districts. And I note the word enforce, they were not given the authority to do anything else. And so when I look at this, there was a promise. The way you fix the promise is you put it to a vote of the people of the district. As to the mechanics of how the committee might decide to do that, that's up to the committee. Would this affect other districts? I don't think so. And I don't think it would affect them for the simple reason that, as best I could determine, no other district had that promise of, in this case, 8 mils, but whatever, when they founded the district. So I still stand in support of, excuse me, of the legislation. And I think the people's right to vote on how they be taxed is fundamental to it. Subject to your question, thank you very much.
Questions for Mr. Winnie? Senator Scott, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, on page 3, line 10, if we provided that it was a majority of the qualified voters of the district voting by mail ballot, would that satisfy the need here? So it'd be not a majority of the total voters, but a majority of the voters voting?
Mr. Winnie.
Mr. Chairman, that gets back to my comment as the mechanics of how you would do it is something that I find up to the committee. You know, my personal predilection would be that all of the people in the district should vote. But again, that's mechanics of how you set it up. And I would pose no objection to that.
Okay, any other questions for Mr. Winnie? Seeing none. Okay, so that's the public testimony that I have signed up and that is in person. Mr. Pickard, did you want to testify on this? You want to jump into the fire with us?
Not at all, sir.
I think so. All right. All right. Representative Stiff, another bite at the apple. Go ahead.
Just, Mr. Chairman, thank you. Just briefly, I did want to correct one factual point here, or two factual points. One is it was stated earlier by a couple of the witnesses that particular district has never imposed more tax than the county general tax. I have the 2017 tax notice from Sublette County for the district reflects that for this particular taxpayer, the taxes paid, assessed by the county general fund were $400.45. And the taxes assessed by this particular Hoback Ranches Service and Improvement District were $419. So at least for the 2017 tax year, this district actually did impose more tax than the county general fund did, just to clip that point. With respect to the comments about the county resolution establishing the district, the procedure, at least for this particular district, and I think it's still the case, the county resolution that establishes the district, that's adopted after the voters have voted. So the voters go to the polls, they think they're voting to create a district with a limit on its taxing powers. That's what they think they're voting on. But if the county resolution that's subsequently adopted does not include that, then the district court judge has said under current law that taxing limit is not enforceable. So I think it's a no-brainer to move this bill forward because it's common sense. It honors the will of the voters when they're voting to form a district. So thank you.
Okay. Representative Roscoe, it's only fair you get another bite too. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate that. I just, in the meantime, I just wanted to correct one thing that was previously stated, that there wasn't a resolution to establish, and I did find one, and it's 86-85J that was registered with the county on July 1st, 1986. But I think just kind of summing up all this testimony, that especially, I guess, Mr. Halstrom's testimony is that really the system that we have now for the service and improvement districts is working fine. And there's really no reason to complicate it all. The voters of the district have a chance to vote on these raising or lowering of their own taxes. So I just don't think, I think this is a solution looking for a problem, and I don't think there is a problem. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman and committee.
Thank you. Appreciate all of the good testimony, but I'm going to shut her down. We're going to close public testimony. For all of you that testified for the first time, well done. Really good job. Really appreciate everybody jumping in. All right, committee. What's your pleasure, committee?
Move the bill.
Moved by Senator Case. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Representative Clem. All right, committee, any proposed amendments? Any proposed amendments to the legislation? I know there was one that was mentioned on page 4. I didn't write that down, unfortunately. Did anybody write that down? If anybody wanted to move that amendment? I'm guessing not. Oh, Senator Scott, go ahead.
Chairman, if I've got it right, it would be on page 4, line 20, to delete the words contrary to and substitute the words and insert the words in excess of. And the intent was to clarify what was meant. I'll move that. I think that is an improvement to the bill.
Is there a second to the proposed amendment?
Second.
Second by Senator Case. Any comments or questions in regards to the proposed amendment?
Question?
Question being called on the amendment. All those in favor, please raise your hand in front of your camera.
I'm not in front of my camera. I'm in the big area
Okay.
there.
All those opposed, please raise your hand in front of the camera. Motion carries. That amendment has been adopted. Mr. Hewitt, do you understand the amendment? Got it. Any other proposed amendments on the proposed legislation? Any other discussion on the proposed legislation? I guess I would just like to state that while this does seem special in nature, I kind of warred in my own mind with that about Hoback Ranch as being the target of this. I would like to note that I am a member of an improvement service district. And I think that's part of a much larger group, so I don't believe there to be a conflict there. But as a member of an improvement service district that I helped found, yes, I know I created more government on my own little road, but it beat the heck out of passing around a coffee can and hoping somebody was going to hold the liability for all of me and my neighbors. I would like to note, though, that this type of legislation does provide some checks. So anyways, vote your conscience. With that and seeing no other comments from any of the committee members, I'm going to go ahead and call the roll. Mr. Hewitt, please call the roll call this week for final adoption.
Senator Case,
Aye.
Senator Nethercott,
Aye.
Senator Schuler,
No.
Senator Scott,
Aye.
Representative Blackburn,
Nope.
Representative Blackburn, I record a no. Representative Clausen,
Aye.
Representative Clem,
Aye.
Representative Clifford,
No.
Representative Duncan,
Aye.
Representative Ayer,
Aye.
Representative Furphy.
Aye.
Representative Furphy, I record an aye. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
Chairman Landon,
Aye.
Chairman Lindholm.
Aye.
That motion is adopted.
All right, committee, that piece of legislation will be moving forward. Obviously, that's another controversial piece of legislation that you've got your work cut out for you during the session to convince the rest of the legislature to support that. We're going to go ahead and go on lunch break. It's currently 12:30-ish right now, so we're going to go ahead and come back at 1:30-ish and be jumping into liquor regulation to kind of change things up. So if we could go on lunch break until 1:30, and members, please turn your video off and mute your microphones in your absence. Thank you, everybody.
Video.
Mr. Chairman, there'll be a new YouTube link also.
Oh, okay, great. Really appreciate that, Katie. Yeah, so for those of you watching on YouTube, know that there'll be a new YouTube link. And for those of you sharing the link on various social media, whether that be Facebook or the new ones that everybody think will change the world if we all just move to a different social media, then